Very well, we continue with the debate on P74. Connie Harbison-Lawrence.
Yes, thank you, sir. I just wanted to thank PPC for consulting the committee about this, and it came as no surprise to any members of the committee that there wasn't consensus about it. And of course, that is in accord with the views that we've heard expressed here today from my colleagues. My personal preference is for the 3-week cycle, as it allows us to plan our work more efficiently and also permits us to agree to such ad hoc meetings as the Carbon Neutral Steering Group, which has been referenced earlier in this debate. And I was pleased to hear Deputy Gardner explain how well she thinks the 3-week cycle works for scrutiny. I wanted to just make reference to excuse me, comments that Deputy Pamplin made regarding the length of time next year that there will be between the election and the return to state sittings after the summer recess. And I think he was rightly concerned that the public could think that potentially members were not working or doing nothing during that time. And obviously, we all know that that is not the case. And I just wanted to remind members that, of course, it is particularly so for the constables who, whether it's an election year or not, always have their parish to run during both summer and, of course, the winter recess. So just to remind members, sir, that I will be supporting the 3-week cycle. Thank you, sir.
Well, does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy. So was somebody indicating a desire to speak? Because it should be in the chat if there is anyone who wishes to indicate a desire to speak. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make a couple of brief points. And initially, I was quite torn when we first started discussing this, and I was against the changes, and I felt that they were less family friendly. And one of the reasons for thinking that was that it would be more difficult to arrange childcare on a 3-weekly cycle rather than a 2-weekly cycle. But having done some investigations, I find that that is not in fact the case, and there are many nurseries that will be flexible in that regard. So I was left to try and decide on balance whether I thought this was the right thing in terms of encouraging diversity in the Assembly from a family-friendly perspective. Not just for my own circumstances, of course, but for a wide range of circumstances that we might find amongst the general population and hopefully any potential states members, because of course we want our states assembly to reflect the diversity of our population. And I do think on balance that the 3-week cycle is better. And the reason why I think that is when we're in the states chamber, there are standing orders, there are fixed timings and ways of doing things, quite rightly so, that we all must stick to come together to perform the functions of our parliament. But the weeks in between, those are the weeks where states members can discharge their functions of their other responsibilities, and we're much more able to be flexible with those other responsibilities, and that's one of the real pros in terms of family-friendly working of this role. That it is very, very it is quite easy to balance with the family because we're essentially our own bosses, aren't we? We can decide whether we want to do emails at nighttime if we want to in the evenings, or we can do them very early in the morning, or we can stick to traditional working hours if we want to. We can balance to some extent our responsibilities as states members with caring responsibilities. So I definitely think that the 3-week cycle would be of benefit, with some caveats, because I note that I think it was just this last sitting we've just had that fell outside of term time, which I think isn't ideal, because traditionally we have always had our sittings just in term time. And having spoken to the chair of PPC, she said in future the aim would be for that not to be the case. So I think with some flexibility, we should move to a 3-week cycle. So we should be able to put in extra sittings if we need to, or shorten to 2 weeks, perhaps at the end of a term, to make things work for us. And also, I think Deputy Russell Labby mentioned about the 5:30 debates that we have sometimes about staying late. And it's about culture change, and we have been sliding a little bit into being perhaps a bit less efficient with our time. I've noticed this over the last couple of years, and perhaps not being able to finish promptly at 5:30 because we haven't used our time effectively. So I would just take this opportunity to raise that with members again, and hope that we can all work together to make efficient use of our time. Hopefully within the 3-week cycle, because I will be supporting that, and I hope members will support that. And that we can make it work for people with all different types of responsibilities, and show the public at the next elections that we are a family-friendly working environment, and that we welcome people to stand for election who have caring responsibilities, and that they can join us and take an active part in the democracy. And I think the 3-week cycle is a positive thing that will help towards that. And there was something that Deputy Gardiner said as well about scrutiny, and she was telling me about how she's having more frequent public hearings. And I think that our working practices will evolve. I do see sometimes that, I do feel sometimes that I would like more frequent opportunities to question ministers, but of course we do have those opportunities with scrutiny, and perhaps we could be more flexible with the way our scrutiny panels operate, and allow non-executive members on an ad hoc basis to join in public hearings with other panels if they have particular areas of interest. And that's something I recently I forgot what the word is now. Was co-opted onto the health panel for their maternity services review, and I like to be flexible with my working practices so that I can add value across the board, the things that I'm interested in and passionate about. So I think on balance, I would like to move to this 3-week cycle, and I'd really like PPC and the GREF to help us pick up on some of the points that have been raised about making better use of our time and better use of our skills as states members, to be more effective and work as a better, more effective Parliament together.
Thank you, Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. It's said that the two things in life that are certain are death and taxes. And if you ask people in general if they'd like to pay less tax, they'd say, yes, please. And if you ask people generally if they'd like to live a bit longer or as long as possible, they would probably say, yes, please. And similarly, if you ask states members, would you rather meet every 3 weeks rather than every 2 weeks? They would say, oh, yes, please, because that's much better for us. It's much better for us to manage our time. It's much more family friendly, and we can get more work done. Now, I'm not sure how that's true, or how for hundreds of years, even under the committee system, where members were perhaps sitting on multiple committees, they still managed to meet every 2 weeks and come in and do their work and balance their constituency or even parish responsibilities with that of the Assembly. And my concern here is that we're looking at it through the wrong end of the telescope. We're looking at it through about what's best for us, what's most convenient for us, rather than recognising that the Assembly is the interface between elected representatives and the public. This is where it happens, if you like. This is where we can be scrutinised. It's not simply about holding ministers to account, or ministers being able to stand up and say what their current policies are and give answers to topical and perhaps urgent questions. It's about that responsibility and about the public display of politics and being transparent and open, and it's done. And quite frankly, it's not an arduous task to meet every 2 weeks. This talk of a treadmill, I mean, it's not this is just a fabrication. It's not a treadmill at all. This has been going on for, as I said, hundreds of years. It's a well-established principle that you meet every 2 weeks. You don't meet on the Monday, incidentally. The Monday is the day for preparation. I have always held my constituency surgeries at Monday lunchtime because I know that I can dedicate that day of the week to my St Brelard constituents, where they can come and see me and talk to me. And I know that on the Tuesday, I'll be in the States Assembly, not every week, but every 2 weeks. And let's look at that. What about if the proposition was to actually say, let's meet every week, like a lot of parliaments around the world do? They manage to meet every week. How on earth do they do that? They're probably much busier than some of us are. They've got many pressing issues to deal with. So there's a strong argument to say that actually we should be meeting every week, not going to every 3 weeks. And to the people who say, oh, but imagine, you know, we can do so much more, we can get so much more done in 3 weeks. Well, imagine what you could get done in 4 weeks if we went to a 4-week cycle. I mean, is that the next step? We say, oh, okay, look, 3 weeks is working really good, but imagine with 4 weeks, if you can do 1 week in the States, you can spend 1 week on your constituency work, you can do 1 week on scrutiny, and you can do 1 week on your planning committee. That's nice, isn't it? 4 weeks, but the reality is it doesn't work like that. We all have to juggle states' responsibilities. And, you know, after we finished what can seem like a long day in the States, but in reality, it's a lot less than what normal people in the real world do. People who don't start at 9:30 and who don't finish at 5:30, who may have to get in earlier and not have the 1.5 hour lunch that we have, and then finish at 5:30. Of course, we know that we may have to field calls at night, and often the evenings are the best time to get back to other people who work because they can't contact us in the daytime. So let's be frank about this. I know there's this myth that we like to create that states members are always super busy, and we would never dare tell anyone that we weren't always busy. But we can keep the Monday generally free for constituency work, for personal matters, and the Friday traditionally, even under the 2 week cycle. We know that we're not sitting in here really for more than 2 days. I mean, let's be honest about it. The record will show 2.5 day cycles. Even with a few meaty debates this week, we're probably going to be out of here sometime tomorrow. So the Monday's kept free, the Friday's kept free. Now, we're telling people we want to go to a 3 week cycle because it's better for democracy. No, it's better for some people in this assembly. And the bottom line is it does mean that ministers, and any of us could be ministers in the future, of course, we could have a different complexion of government. So it's not about this current government. There will be fewer opportunities to question ministers and for ministers to convey their policy on topical and urgent issues if we move to a 3 week cycle. Now, we're not the UK, but if you look at the UK, there's a practice of question time being every week on a Wednesday, and everyone knows exactly that every week, whoever the Prime Minister is, whoever the leader of the opposition is, they will be holding each other to account, but the government in particular will be held to account every week. But work still goes on, because whether it comes to scrutiny or whether it comes to government work or committee work, of course, members put a lot of work, time and effort in, but it's really the civil service, it's really the GREF staff who do the majority of the work, who write the reports, and it's for ministers then and us to either present those policies, to present the legislation, the regulations, the budgets, the business plans in the Assembly. And it's a completely retrograde step at a time when we should be trying to encourage more people to engage in democracy, when we are having our first proper democracy week, to say, well, actually, let's move away from a 2 week cycle, let's move to a 3 week cycle because we think it works better for us and we can get more done. Complete nonsense. You're not pulling the wool over my eyes, and you're not going to pull the wool over the eyes of the public who are watching us very closely, even if they can't be watching us direct, because many of them, as I said, will be working, but they'll pick up on this issue and they'll say, so states members who've got it pretty cushy already are giving themselves an extra week. And of course, you know, they'll say, oh, I saw so-and-so at the airport again, or so-and-so doesn't even live in Jersey. And that's going to be really convenient for him to be able to go away and spend more time in his second home. And, you know, completely unfair, of course, because we can all work from wherever. But the perception is important, but the reality and the practice is also important, that this distracts from our core function, the oath that we take. And the only oath is, the only obligation we have is to attend the States Assembly and its meetings when we are called upon to do so. And it's quite convenient for some if they say, actually, we're going to reduce the amount of States meetings that we need to go to, the number of weeks that we're going to attend. I don't buy into that. Thank you very much.
Very much, Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. It's unusual for me to sit here and say that I agree with Deputy Tedier, and I think he makes many good points. I do think perception is vitally important. The public already perceive we perhaps don't do anything like we do, which sounds strange, but we perform a much larger function than they feel that we do. And I can understand that if you're a government minister, I know my own minister works incredibly long hours and finds it difficult at times to prepare for state sittings because they are so time consuming. However, we've had debates this morning where people have come on, they've said, oh, we're ignored, the Assembly's ignored. We're not listened to. Why aren't we listened to? And yet we're now voting to make it an extra week when they're not listened to, really. We'll make it 3 weeks, so you won't be listened to for an extra week. Well, when we were on 2 weeks, I think there were several things that happened. One, the questions were much more topical, obviously, because if you are asking a question with a week or so to go, you're going to get a much more topical answer. Two, I think people were more interested and things didn't drag on quite as long as they have done. We've ended up with far more 4 or 5 day sittings because of this. And I also think there's something so that many people may have missed, and that's that the press, very largely in Jersey, because other than the Bulls and the Reds, there's not an awful lot for the local press to concentrate on. There were, thank goodness, we don't have too many murders and of that ilk. So politics tends to consume a lot of the press's time. Now, when we have a 2 week sitting, they have a lot of questions, a lot of topical answers, and a lot of things they can work with. And it has most certainly been a massive feature since we have gone to the 3 day week, but that would rather date me, going back to the 70s. Since we've gone to the 3 week sitting, that the press have had to rely on a few ramblings from 1 or 2 malcontents within the chamber, rather than official answers and the proper business of the chamber. And I think that has been a disappointing result of switching to this 3 week sitting. I shall leave it there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I guess in a sense I'm breaking standing orders because really I want to agree fully with the previous speaker. Deputy Ash, I think has got it right, and what he's very ably elucidated is that is what we all know in communications: when there's a vacuum, it gets filled by others. And certainly I think that's one of the consequences of this 3 week cycle, is that there is a wider period with very little political activity from the external perspective, from an islander's perspective. And so that gets filled by people who in Deputy Ash's terms, were malcontents. And I don't know if that's appropriate way of describing people who may not be happy, but I guess it is. It says so in the word. But I come back to, and I haven't really changed my position since I spoke on this in 2020. I am deeply worried, and I said it earlier, I will fight to protect this assembly. And the move many years ago, 16 years ago, to ministerial government, there's no doubt, I mean, there are pros and cons to everything, but one of the cons was it stripped the assembly of its role as government. Because we've got to remember, before that, the assembly was the government. So now it's not, it's a selected part of the assembly that becomes the government. But in order for that system to work appropriately, the executive, as they're known, needs to be held to account. And in my mind, there's no doubt that that has been happening less as a result of the 3-weekly cycle. And I think, again, Deputy Ash said it very well with regard to questions, their topicality, things like this. I do appreciate that. I think from a government perspective, they are less caught up in this kind of routine of States Assembly, do some government work, States Assembly, do some government work. I understand that, I get that. And their analysis is probably correct. But they are doing that work for this assembly. And if this assembly is less able to see the work they're doing, less able to question the work that the government is doing, then what you're doing is, again, weakening the assembly. And I have a serious issue as a Democrat, not in an American party sense, but in the sense of I believe in democracy, that this assembly needs to be meeting regularly in order to hold that government to account. But it also holds another really important role. And actually, the lunch I've just had was a brilliant example of it. Because we're at the assembly today, I bumped into one of the connétables, and we said, do you fancy going for lunch? So we went to lunch. And in the cafe we went to, or the restaurant we went to, we bumped into another connétable and another member of the States who's in the executive. Completely unexpected. We sat down at the table. We were invited first to sit at their table, and we had a discussion. In that discussion, it was quite clear that the other member of the executive learned a great deal about an area that he is currently working on from 2 members of scrutiny. And without that, he would never have learned this information, which should be quite helpful to one of the projects he's working on. The problem is because we've divided the assembly into scrutiny and executive, that information isn't passing around within a normal course of business. That information now, that sort of information only passes around when you happen to meet in the assembly or in lunchtimes, etc. And by moving to a 3-week routine, we have limited the opportunities for that to happen. I know very well that the 4 of us would not have got together for lunch by invitation at the beginning. You know, we weren't going to phone each other up and say, let's have lunch together today, had it been a normal week of working outside the assembly. And so I know it's informal, but it's a really vital role that this assembly plays. It puts us in touch with each other. I think somebody I think has already said it. It also takes, by meeting each other regularly, it also takes the sting out of a lot of what can become politically nasty. Because we know each other, we see each other, we just are better acquainted with each other. And that does mean that I think some of the nastiness disappears. Whereas actually what is building up now is you have 3 weeks, or you have a gap of 2 weeks before you meet in the 3rd week. And in that time, people have got very frustrated. There's a particular issue, it builds and builds and builds. And so then it spills over into the floor of the assembly, and debates as a result can be nastier. So, sir, I really hope, I mean, I often feel this way because I'm still of the opinion that the original proposition in 2020 was brought, and I know they denied it, but I believe that was brought by PPC at the request of the Council of Ministers or some members of the Council of Ministers, because they felt it suited them. We're not here to suit ourselves. We're here to suit the island of Jersey and to do the best for the island of Jersey. In my opinion, that involves sitting here every 2 weeks, not every 3 weeks. And I think we should forget about our own individual situation in this. If I was being selfish and just wanted to, make sure that my work as assistant minister was, allowed to continue unfettered and without any reproach or any criticism, then I wouldn't want the assembly to be occurring very often at all. But I don't believe that. I believe I should be held to account. I believe, you know, I made a quite a tough speech earlier. I voted in a way that a lot of people would preferred me not to have voted earlier. But I do that because I believe that I need to be held to account. If I am ever a minister in the Council of Ministers, I believe I should be able to stand up from time to time and face censure in all its forms when I haven't performed and delivered. And that's what the Assembly is here for, and it enables us to do these things. So I ask members, please do vote down this proposition. Let us go back to the 2-weekly cycle, because it's what islanders need, and it's what islanders deserve. I believe it's what this Assembly needs and what this Assembly deserves. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Hegera.
Thank you, sir, and I will be short because I pretty much agree with what the previous speaker said. However, I would just like to make a point that I am part of PPC and I am not in favour of the move to a 3-week cycle, because I feel that we do lose something quite vital by not seeing each other on a 2-weekly cycle. I agree that I think this means that you don't speak, you don't negotiate, and I think it does mean that we drift and we actually sometimes are becoming dysfunctional. So from my perspective, I think the 2-week cycle works far, far better, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Alves to respond.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, I've brought this proposition obviously in my capacity as PPC chair, so I feel that I need to maintain neutral, especially as we on PPC did not reach a consensus between us, as I'm sure some members have heard throughout this debate. However, I would like to make members aware of how I personally feel outside of my role as PPC chair. Members will know that when this was proposed last year, I wasn't PPC chair, although I was on the PPC committee, and I spoke in favour of the 3-weekly sitting. I feel that this trial hasn't necessarily been representative. It wasn't carried out during normal times. So in hindsight, maybe we should have delayed this trial to when things were back to normal, but I think none of us could have guessed that COVID would go on for as long as it has. So I have personally struggled with how I feel about this. And having listened to everybody's comments today, on the one hand, it has made managing my workload a lot easier. I have been able to be better prepared for sittings. I have been able to deal with constituency issues a lot more efficiently. I've not had to ask constituents to wait a week or more before I could schedule things in between scrutiny panel meetings, reviews and other committee meetings. Members are obviously aware that I have probably spread myself quite thinly. Like a fresher during Freshers Week, I signed up for a lot of things as a new member, and so it has personally helped me to manage that workload, and means that I've been a lot more efficient as well. On the other hand, I do also see members' points in relation to the frequency of sittings and the opportunities to debate and question government on topical areas. And especially with it being an election year next year, I think that probably having more opportunities to sit would be favourable. So I think it's important to mention that regardless of which way the vote goes today, there is nothing to stop the next PPC from looking at this again, from bringing it back to the Assembly with the new cohort in the next term. So I think I'd like to now, just speaking as PPC chair, I would like to thank all members for their contributions. I'd especially like to thank Deputy Labby, who actually addressed a lot of the things that have been brought up during this debate. He is correct. PPC are prepared and happy to revisit and look at all the things that have been mentioned during this debate, and look at changing them to suit members and to also obviously with the ultimate outcome of increasing productivity. So just to specifically address some of the comments from members about the written question system, this is something that we can look at and act upon. Any changes or improvements that the committee would like to make once we've heard and obviously taken on board all the comments that have been made in this debate. And if anybody's got any other further comments afterwards, then please do get in contact with the committee. There was a requirement with the adoption of the previous proposition that members could ask the same number of written questions as under the 2 weekly cycle. So that's why that system this system was chosen to do that. An alternative that we did consider at the time was increasing the number of written questions a member could ask for each states meeting. But I think that at the time the desire was just to leave it as it was. So as not to leave it so long between being able to submit questions. So that's why we went to that weekly routine. So yes, we could easily revert to a system of attaching the written questions to meetings again, up to the number of questions a member may ask. It used to be 5 questions, and I think Deputy Ward highlighted that there's been an issue with the publication of the questions. So the written questions are published on the website. He's right, there is a bit of an issue when they are attached to individual members' pages, but the question pages does list them all. So, sir, as always, I am in the hands of the Assembly, and I would, sorry, I think I've just seen somebody's just, yes, sorry, there was also the issue about sitting during term time. I think when we looked at scheduling the 3 weekly sittings at the time, to get them in, we did end up going into, I think it was the first week of the summer holidays this time round. Obviously, this is something that, in order to be family friendly, I would like to avoid if this is adopted. And it may be that in order to do this, there would be times where there wouldn't be a 3-week gap. But obviously, members would be made aware of this in advance, and this would be something that would have to be agreed with the whole of the PPC committee. So I hope I've tried to address as much as I can in this summing up. If there are any sort of queries after the vote, whichever way it may go, please, I'd like to urge members to get in contact with myself or anybody on the committee. So, sir, I maintain the proposition.
Much. Very well. I would ask the greffier to put a voting link into the chat. A vote pour maintains the 3-week cycle. A vote contre moves back to the previous cycle. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. Do you wish to record a vote, Connie?
So my battery's just died. Can I record a contre, please, sir?
Contre.
Yes, please.
Could you repeat that instruction about the voting? A vote pour is for which system?
A vote pour maintains the 3-weekly cycle. A vote contre changes the 3-weekly cycle back to a 2-weekly cycle.
And I don't appear to have a voting cap here. Is the voting?
Yes,
thing?
but the voting is open. You should have a voting link in the chat, Deputy.
It's disappeared. It's disappeared, sir. Can I have a contra vote, please, sir, through you?
Yes, certainly. If you're not going to vote in the link, then I will mark as contre.
Thank you, sir.
No, no. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting. worked very well. Again. Definitely, we don't appear to have recorded a vote. No, I'm not doing. Bear with us a moment. Sorry? Ah, right. So apparently the text is not coming through in a readable font, so it'll take just a moment until that's corrected and the numbers, as if by magic, will appear. I will divide them in. Right. Very well. The that is the result. Proposition has been adopted. 22 votes pour, 18 votes contre, no abstentions within the link. A further 2 votes contre and 1 abstention in the chat, and a further 2 votes pour, I beg your pardon, not in the chat, in the chamber, and a further 2 votes pour in the chat. Could you read the names out, please, Graphia? That's been called for.
Those members voting core in the link: Deputy Guida, the Connaught Harbour Trinity, Deputy Lewis, the Deputy of St Peter, Deputy Martin, Deputy Labby, the Deputy of St Mary, Deputy Truscott, the Deputy of St Martin, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Young, the Connaught Harbour St Helier, the Deputy of St John, Senator Lafondre, the Deputy of Grouville, Senator Farnham, the Connaught Harbour St Peter, the Connaught Harbour St Lawrence, Deputy Gardner, the Deputy of Trinity, the Deputy of St Juan, and Deputy Doublé, with Deputy Masson and the Connaught Harbour St Mary voting pour in the chat. Members voting contre: Deputy Ayer, Deputy Pamplin, Senator Mezek, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Ward, Deputy Lehegara, Deputy Ash, Senator Valois, the Connaught Harbour St John, Deputy Alves, the Connaught Harbour St Martin, Deputy Tadier, Senator Gorst, Senator Moore, the Connaught Harbour St Brelard, Deputy Morel, Deputy Pinnell, Senator Pallett, and in the chat, and also voting contre, the Connaught Harbour Grouville and Deputy Southern, and the Connaught Harbour St Clement abstained.
Well, then the States remains at a 3-week. Connaught Harbour Grouville, you've put speak, please. Is that?
Sorry, sir, I think you said that I voted pour, but it's been corrected.
It's been corrected.
Thank you, sir.
I beg your pardon. Very well. The next item is the Draft Finance 2020 Budget Jersey Law Appointed Day Act P75 lodged by the Chief Minister. Main respondent for the debate is the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, Senator Moore, and I ask the Greffier to read the citation.
Draft Finance 2020 Budget Jersey Law 2020 Appointed Day Act 2000. The states make this act under Article 36(3) of the Finance 2020 Budget Jersey Law 2020.
Yes, Minister.
As Deputy St Peter is acting.
Deputy St Peter.
Thank you, sir. Currently, employers submit their tax, social security and manpower information on different returns and to different timescales. As part of the Minister for Treasury's plans for rationalising these returns, it is intended that from January 2022, employers will submit a combined employer report every month, which will include tax, social security contributions and manpower all on the same return. For many employers, the new return will eliminate significant duplication of information requests across the currently separate returns, bringing opportunities to cut down on administration. As Assistant Chief Minister, I have responsibility on behalf of the Chief Minister for the Control of Housing and Work Law 2012. In order to allow manpower returns to be included upon the monthly combined employer return, the Control of Housing and Work Jersey Law 2012 requires a minor amendment. The Assembly previously adopted the Finance 2020 Budget Jersey Law P109 2019 on the 2nd of December 2019, which introduced the combined employer return. And this Appointed Day Act triggers the required changes within the Finance Law 2020, which in turn makes a required parallel amendments to Article 32 of the Control of Housing and Work Law 2012 regarding monthly manpower returns. You will recall, whilst accepting P137 migration control policy, the importance of gathering accurate and timely data. The move to monthly manpower reporting as part of the combined employer return will enhance the speed and accuracy of that data, allowing more informed decisions on migration and population issues. I commend this proposition to the Assembly.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Any member wish to speak on the Act? No member wishes to speak on the Act? Then I close the debate and ask the referee to place a link into the voting, into the chat. The link is there. I ask the referee to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the referee to close the voting. The Act has been adopted. 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions within the link, and a further 1 vote pour in the body of the Assembly and 2 votes pour in the chat. Very well. The next item is the Draft States of Jersey Amendment Number 10 Law P77, lodged by the Chief Minister. The main respondent to the debate will be the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft States of Jersey Amendment Number 10 Law 2000, a law to amend further the States of Jersey Law 2005. The states, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty in Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Apologies, sir. The Deputy of St Peter is also acting as rapporteur on this.
Indeed. Deputy of St Peter.
Thank you again, sir. Members will be aware that I sat as a member of the Migration Policy Development Board, and that this board felt that the interplay between population policy and all areas of ministerial responsibility is so wide that it should be specifically referred to in the responsibilities of the Council of Ministers. I am pleased that the Assembly was of the same opinion of this importance in giving their approval to the same P137 migration control policy on the 3rd of March 21, and this amendment is the enactment of that approval. The population policy will need to be a living, moving document with the flexibility to react to the future changes, challenges and opportunities that present themselves to the island over time. This amendment will place a formal requirement upon the Council of Ministers to consider the population impacts of government policies and require the Council of Ministers to discuss and agree a population policy on at least an annual basis. The report that accompanies this amendment acknowledges the importance of the data that Deputy Pershard highlighted within her proposition P120. I can give an assurance that the information and level of detail that Deputy Pershard has required within her proposition will be included within each annual population policy. This change will apply the day after the registration of the amendment. Sir, I'd be happy to answer any question that members may have, and I propose the principles.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Ward.
Yes, sir, and it is a number of questions I would like to ask, because very frequently, and I understand the amendment that came forward from Deputy Pershard, but often we talk about, there's a line in here that says to be discussed frequently, or discussed on a regular basis, I think it is. I can't, sorry, so I've lost the wording because my computer just moved. And whenever that discussion is mentioned, I get concerned, because I think, well, okay, you know, we can discuss anything, but it doesn't mean any action is going to be taken. In fact, recently in this sitting and previously, we've discussed a lot of actions that haven't been taken, and what happens as a consequence of those. And it's clear that there are no real consequences to things not happening. And I hope, I'm not suggesting this is, sir, but I'd like to say, I hope that this is not a token gesture towards something that was adopted to this assembly. That's my concern. And we talk a lot about data. I would like to know more about the nature of this data. Updated infrastructural data. Is that to do with the number of homes that are available, how many roads there are, the number of parking spaces, the number of places to lock up your bicycle, the cubic area of swimming pool available, the leisure facilities. I mean, sometimes going to those ludicrous examples gives an example of why we have to be precise in what we're talking about. Because we could be saying, well, actually, one of the pieces of data is going to be how much spaces and areas to walk your dog. We may have to limit the population of dogs if there isn't much space to walk them. Yes, it's ludicrous, but what are we talking about? And before we pass pieces of legislation like this, that to some extent, sir, sort of pat ourselves on the back to say we've done something, we, I believe, very strongly need to know what it is that we're doing. It says here, educational, health-related, environmental and social requirements of any projected population growth. But, sir, the educational requirements that I may put for a population may be very different from the educational requirements of somebody who has a very different political perspective from me. So we need to be defining what it is that we're talking about and the data that we're collecting. Otherwise, sir, this does become tokenism. Now, I'm sure that the intention behind this initial amendment to P137 was to have precise data on particular areas. But I'd just like some understanding from the proposer as to how that is viewed, both by the proposer and by government. And in terms of environmental requirements, I would like to have seen here something about the environmental impact, the environmental challenge, the environmental cost, because there isn't anything there on that of population. Because actually you can have, sir, a population that is large with low environmental impact if you get it right. You could have a small population with a massive environmental impact if you get it wrong. And so these, again, are the parameters within which we have to be clear as to what we're talking about. I think I've undertaken a bit of an exercise in pedantry here, sir, but I think it's important that we know what we're talking about when we come to this sort of generic proposal. So that's one of the first things I would like to ask, and it is a set of questions, and I think the principles is the right time to do that. And also the frequency of the discussion. A yearly population policy, will that be on the 1st of January? Because we know the Assembly works. This is a very important point, sir. We know the way the Assembly works. The government plan is rushed in at the end of each year. We're not rushed in, but we have a debate. And there is I see the Chief Minister raising his eyebrows at me. I'm used to that to some extent. But what I meant there was it is a rushed process in terms of there is an absolute deadline that we have to reach in order to implement it for the next year. I get that. I understand that. We all understand that. If we're going to have a population policy each year, that is going to be another demand at a set time. And that could influence, so if we're going to have changes to the way we have migrant workers of every 9 months, for example, it could have to fit in with that, or it could be completely out of kilter as to when another population policy will come into to play halfway through one section of 9-month contracts. So it has to be thought through really carefully as to how this is actually going to work with the mechanisms of this assembly, the mechanisms of government. And are we going to get to the stage where we say, well, actually, this year we're not going to have that population policy because the policy officers were too busy. And actually, the policy pipeline was blocked because something else happened that was urgent as well. So if we're going to make promises in this assembly today about what we're going to do, the mechanism for this needs to come back to us. So the more I'm talking myself and thinking, I wonder whether this is actually in the right state to come to the assembly without this detail. But perhaps again, I'm just on a impedant mode, which I do apologise for. But so I hope I've made it clear. And to the proposer, I just would like to see some of that detail before we go any further with this, and before, which seems to be an obvious vote because we voted for this before. So. But it would be nice to know what the actual detail of the mechanism of this is. So thank you.
The Constable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I think my point is rather more straightforward than the previous speakers. Bearing in mind the debate that we had earlier on P72, sir, I'd like the rapporteur to clarify for the Assembly what is meant by the Chief Minister is committed to lodging a common population policy for debate by the end of December 2021. Does that mean that a proposition will be lodged by the end of December 2021? Or does it mean that it will be lodged and a debate will be able to take place before the end of December 2021? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Constable. Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. I just want to comment from the regards to the Corporate Services Panel. I chair the Migration and Policy Review Panel, so I thought it was important that I do say a few words. I'm not going to say a great deal, but that I do say a few words. First of all, I just want to thank my colleagues as well for the work they've been doing, because that's Deputy Truscott at St Brellards and Deputy Ira at St Helier, because we have been keeping a close eye on the work that the Assistant Chief Minister is doing in regards to the population policy, and have met him regularly and actually met him during the summer in regards to the progress he's making on the population policy. But I think I just want to start by saying this proposition, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the Assistant Chief Minister, but this proposition is merely putting it's just amending the States of Jersey law to ensure that a population policy is discussed and agreed on a regular basis. So it's just putting it in the law. The Constable of St Lawrence just mentioned around whether a population policy will be lodged by the end of the year. And again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the Assistant Chief Minister, but that is the intention of P137 was to ensure that a population policy is prepared, and I know the Assistant Chief Minister is doing it at the current time. He's still out to consultation on that on the population policy, but the intention is to draft a population policy that will be lodged in time to be debated before the end of the year. And that's something that we've regularly been told by the Assistant Chief Minister and his policy officers. In terms of its actual proposition, I think we support it as a panel. It's bringing into effect P137. But I think what we do need to recognise is that the population policy is not going to be a one document solution, but rather something which would need to have flexibility to evolve around the island's social and economic needs. And Deputy Ward mentioned data, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute, but it will need to evolve, and we will need to understand how the island's social and economic needs are changed, because clearly we're seeing changes in the economy, we're seeing needs within various sectors of the economy, and the population policy and migration policy are going to have to adapt and be flexible in regards to the needs of our local economy. What I do need to point, I think, really be clear is that, you know, there is an obligation from the government to provide a robust framework for any future policymakers, one which addresses challenges that we're experiencing now and gives the guidance to find the balance that we need to strike. And by that I mean, again, ensuring that we understand the needs of the economy. We are collecting data on a day by day, week by week, month by month basis to allow us to fully explore how that population policy may change. And I suppose, rather than me mentioning it later on, I'll mention it now around data. It's clear that there are IT systems that are going to need to be put in place to capture that data that we understand will be ready for January 2022. That's something we question the Assistant Chief Minister on a regular basis, and something he might want to update members on when he sums up. But it is important that those systems are in place, because once a new population policy is in place, and I think what we're going to have to remember is the population policy that is lodged this year won't have the benefit of any new data. They will have to, or the Assistant Chief Minister and his team will have to put that together with the data that they have, and it probably won't include any of the data from the recent census. So that will mean, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, is that this population policy, or a population policy that is drafted for this year, probably will not be as detailed as one may be in the future. But I'll let the Assistant Chief Minister maybe comment on that when he sums up. I think we do have to acknowledge that whichever way we look at it, and I'm not making excuses for the time this has taken, because I've been trying to push the Assistant Chief Minister to do the work as quickly as possible, but it has been a difficult 18 months, and I think time has now come to ensure that government is focused on delivering a population policy that not only the public in general can understand, but those within business can work with. And that's going to be a real challenge, because I think not only have we had the pandemic to deal with, we're also got Brexit that we still having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and we'll carry on having an effect on the economy, as we're seeing at present with both hospitality, retail and other sectors struggling to find staff. For some, it will have seemed to have been a very slow process. It's a very complex area, and I don't think any member would try to kid themselves that it's not. And it's one that I think has stumped previous governments in terms of trying to find a robust population policy, something that people are comfortable with. And the government has felt necessary to go back out to consultation, which from a personal point of view, I feel I'm not sure that was necessary. The Assistant Chief Minister may feel differently, but I'm not sure there's not too much we don't know about how the population feels about levels of population and some of the issues that revolve around that. But if it's going to provide a more robust population policy when it is finally drafted and put before the Assembly later this year, then maybe that's a piece of work that needed to be done. But I'm yet to fully understand what they are trying to achieve with it, as are the panel, and we look forward to seeing the results of that consultation when it's complete. But what I will say is that the panel, as I hope the Assistant Chief Minister will agree, has tried to work as constructively as possible with the Assistant Chief Minister and his team, because we do want to see something that is beneficial to the island, and that people can get behind and can work with. So we carry on working closely with the Assistant Chief Minister, and we will carry on scrutinising and ensuring that the States Assembly get the information they need to judge the population policy when it is finally lodged. I will come back to data again, because I can't stress enough how important it is that that government and in fact industry itself will need to understand where we are on a day-to-day basis in terms of resource needs in the island and labour needs in the island, and we're not going to know that unless we've got information on who is leaving, who's coming and going, where people are employed, and some of that at the moment is sketchy. It's not as detailed as it needs to be. And again, I can't stress enough how important it's going to be to have IT systems in place by the end of the year. But again, we've been assured that will be in place by January the 1st. I think that's really all I wanted to add. I think in terms of this particular proposition, it is just getting those words in the law to say this population policy, or a population policy, common policy on population, needs to be discussed on a regular basis and annually. So it's now in the States of Jersey law if it's passed today. We've had the debate around the migration controls. The panel has provided a report to the Assembly which set out some of the details within the migration controls. And that's something else I think that the Assistant Chief Minister will have to look at, because we're already getting rumblings, I think, from sectors of the economy around whether the controls that have been suggested within the migration control policy are too strict. But I think what we do need to have is a population policy that is going to be flexible and is going to clearly meet the needs of a changing economy. And let's make no bones about it, our economy is going to change as we move forward for all sorts of reasons, and that includes the finance industry. So we're supportive of this particular amendment, and we will carry on doing a close piece of scrutiny work on the population policy as it develops. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. If you don't mind, could I start speaking by asking a question of the SG, the Solicitor General again, please, sir? Sorry, Solicitor.
Yes, it depends what the question is, I'm sure, but
yes, well, absolutely, but it's pertinent to this debate. It was just in the proposed amendment, it says that the appropriate paragraph will sit in Article 18.2 of the States Jersey Law 2005 after subparagraph B there is inserted, and then obviously the paragraph. I just wanted to know is subparagraph E in 18.2 talks about the common strategic policy, and it says that agreeing and lodging for referral to one or more scrutiny panels established on the standing orders a statement of the common strategic policy, and it goes on to F. Once this paragraph is inserted, Solicitor, I was wondering, will the elements agreeing and lodging for referral to one or more scrutiny panels still pertain to this new paragraph?
I'm going to have a look. I'm afraid I wasn't expecting a question on this.
I do apologise.
No, not at all. In which case, you'll come back to us on that.
Yes, could I just ask the Deputy to clarify the question, because I wasn't sure I understood without the law in front of me what precisely he was asking.
Okay, it's just that in Article 18.2, subparagraph E, it says agreeing and lodging for referral to one or more scrutiny panels, ... a statement of their own common strategic policy, and and this is to be inserted, this paragraph is to be inserted after that and so I'm trying to understand whether this paragraph will be subject to the agreeing and lodging for referral to one or more scrutiny panels.
Is that sufficiently clear, Mr.
So yes, I'll have a look.
To apologise, if I'd realised I was going to ask the Solicitor General this question, I would have let him know in advance. So I do apologise for that.
No, not at all. But would you like to continue, Deputy?
Thank you. And to enlighten the Assembly, I think the proposition itself is fine. I will be voting for it. There's no question. I just understand that population policy is of enormous importance to all islanders, or many islanders at any rate. And so whilst this will be discussed in and agreed within the Council of Ministers, my concern is that it then has a public viewing of some sort, and obviously the Common Strategic Policy by law has to go to scrutiny. So in my view, it would be beneficial if this element of this common population policy would have to by law go to scrutiny, not just at the will of the ministers. And so that's really where I'm coming from. I'm just hoping that the common population policy isn't something that future councils of ministers could agree amongst themselves and keep to themselves, per se. And the reason I say this, and this isn't a dig at the External Relations Minister who's not here, it's just the External Relations Policy, which is dealt with in subparagraph C, that isn't subject to those clauses about scrutiny, and does require, or did require, a little bit of digging to get hold of. I'm not saying it's being held back, it wasn't. It's just that it wasn't automatically kind of published and provided. And so I'm hoping that this wouldn't be the case with this proposition. And if it is, I think it'd be worthy of future amendment. If this new subparagraph isn't subject to the scrutiny panel element, then I think it'll be worthy of future amendment to bring it into line and make sure it is by law having to be referred to scrutiny. So that's really it. I will be supporting it, no question. Just want to make sure it gets a public airing too. So
thank you very much, Deputy. Solicitor, are you ready to advise the Assembly?
So yes, looking at Article 18, I read 18 paragraph 2, subparagraph E to be a freestanding thing, and it follows that paragraph 2, subparagraph EA would not fall within those things to be referred to scrutiny under 2E. It would simply be a separate function of the Council of Ministers to discuss and agree on a regular basis, at least annually, their common policy on population.
Thank you, sir.
Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I think I'd like to follow the theme but broaden out what Deputy Morell has said. Looking at this amendment, it does, as the Solicitor General has said, create what is a standalone task for the Council of Ministers by a minority of, 7 is the minimum number, to form, discuss and update a population policy. And then obviously the question in my mind is then what happens to it? And of course it's updated annually, and of course certainly I believe what the island of course wants is a population policy which is long term, because annual adjustments are needed, absolutely right, but it does need to have something which is sustainable. And of course I do wonder why, when I look back, the origin of this law change was discussed as the report tells us, on the 3rd of March 21, and it asks us to do what this amendment does, but it adds on some words. It says that the policy on population would be that is reviewed and updated annually based on, these are key words, based on the prior year's population growth, and that includes annually updated infrastructural, educational, health related, and this is the key thing, environmental and social requirements of any projected population growth. Well, I think what that says to me is that when we agreed that, what we were seeking was a policy of having sustainable growth, because the reality is our population has grown unsustainably. It isn't just a question of enabling our economy. I think that's what's got us into this situation. Members, I think, should reflect on joining up the links between economic growth, population growth, housing demands, health costs, education costs, infrastructure needs, right across the whole piece. We all know they go together. And so what we've got here is a standalone provision in the law, which sounds fine, but of course it doesn't include any elements of that part of the proposition which I've read there, which about sustainability, and particularly the environmental requirements. And of course, that's rather inconsistent with other laws, because when we altered the public finances law, we included a requirement for well-being, and well-being is including very much about environmental and social implications. So we're asked to agree, and I mean, I've no means to doubt it. It says the report goes on. It says that the Chief Minister gives assurances that this will be done. In other words, we've got the assurance there, but it is not practice, it says, to include the level of detail within the primary legislation. Well, my point will be is we did it within the public finances law on well-being, and I hope that future consideration will be given to this, because we need some. We are going to have, which we need the states to decide, a legal requirement for the Council of Ministers to drive this. It certainly should be subject to the scrutiny, and certainly because it's a matter of public property. It's public property. It's not, in my view, an exclusive thing for the Council of Ministers, but they're responsible for producing it. So everything Deputy Morell said is right. But assurances that we have, I'm hoping that there will be consideration to how that can be backed up with some amendment and strengthened in the public finances, in the States of Jersey law, so that the requirements of what was, I believe, required for a sustainable migration and population policy is what that is intended to do, and not merely an economic device. I think maybe others may consider that to be required. Doesn't mean I'm not making light. There's no issues there are, but nonetheless, sustainability means finding where that balance is, which we have lacked for decades and got us in the situation in many ways that we're in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles. Then I close the debate and call upon the Deputy of St. Peter to respond.
Thank you, sir. We've drifted into a population policy debate, which is great because it's good initial feedback as to the feelings of the Assembly. When I started on this, it was quite clear that I was not going to bring a population policy that would be debated, approved or not approved, and then just left to gather dust. I was very keen within the population policy to include some hooks and triggers that meant it had to be reviewed on a regular basis. This wasn't the one I had in my mind because I don't think legally very well, but this is very much something when given to me, I was totally in support of, because it commits the Council of Ministers to regularly review the population policy. If we've learned anything over the last 18-20 months, we've learned the pace of change. I can't believe some of the historians here will question whether there has been an assembly that's had to adapt to two major external influences as much as we have done over the term of this particular assembly. And therefore, even a year could possibly be too long to respond to the needs of the population of this island. I'm moving into a population policy now. So that is what it is. It's a determination that it will be revisited but also be revisited by the Council of Ministers, because without having every single minister in full support of playing his or her role within the population policy, it will flounder. All the cogs on the wheel must work in sync perfectly. Can I thank Senator Pallett for his support? It has been a very, very constructive and positive engagement, and I thank him for saying that. The data is the big issue. Now, whilst the system we have in place or plan to have in place is, I believe, on track, it won't be 1st of January, it'll be certainly early in the new year, and let's accept it'll take many cycles in order to have valid data that can be analysed. It will only be a subset of what is actually needed. I don't think we need to share my views on the IT systems that we have within this particular government, but I am confident that with the new ITS project, etc., that is being addressed. We will not have the census data. That is not to be published until March anyway. So I think it is fair to say that we will use whatever data we have, whatever data we can extract from whatever compatible systems are out there, but it's going to be a long-term project until we can have what the normal commercial world has in today's systems: push a button, get a report, make a decision. But that has to be the goal and the objective. Senator Pallett says another thing: there's not much we don't know. I think the island at large are quite clear on their feelings. The challenge isn't knowing more, it's knowing how to fix it. And that is what the population policy will be about. But I thank Senator Pallett again. Deputy Ward, I think that some of that has been covered. I mean, it's about the frequency. It's about ensuring that we have nailed down the frequency of the particular the reviews, as it were, when they are, and that is noted. But I think what I wrote down here is it's one step at a time. A lot of people have been coming to me saying, you know, I don't envy you the task. You know, it's the poison chalice. Why has it been ignored for so long? Well, because it's in the hard box. So what I'm working on is it is one stage at a time. If we get it right first time, the job won't be done well enough because it'll be treated too simply. Constable of St. Lawrence, so analytical. Sorry, sir, she's so analytical. The P120 stated that we should lodge and debate by the end of 2022. I have spent my whole summer, I've been public to say I will speak to absolutely anybody in the island who wishes to give me their views, and that's occupied a lot of time, and it's been a fascinating experience. We are still doing workshops with Jersey Business. We still have some other plans to engage, particularly with the youth of the island, both on island and off island. We need to understand why people have left the island and not returned, or why they haven't returned. So technically, yes, we should, but also the comments from scrutiny from Deputy Morell, i.e. we want to ensure that Senator Pallett and his scrutiny panel have a full time to review that I may come back and ask the leave of the Assembly to debate it on January the 18th, but it will certainly be delivered this side of New Year. We are working towards not doing that, but I don't want to compromise what's potentially, hopefully, going to be a very good piece of work for the sake of 2 or 3 weeks. But that we will advise and seek your approval in what professional capacity, I don't know. Deputy Young, I think, said what happens to it afterwards. It's living, moving document, and discuss sustainability. Deputy Morell noted to ensure that I can't commit to it, but I'll ensure that it's looked at, and if viable, no reason why it won't be, that this is put into law to go to scrutiny. If I've missed anybody, I apologise. I could never write at school, and I can't read my writing to today. But with that, I propose the proposition. Thank you, sir. I move the proposition.
With the principals, very well. Principals, then I'm ask the greffier to place a link into the chat for voting. As I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Right. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted, 41 votes for, no votes contra, no abstentions in the link, a further 2 votes for in the chat, and a further 1 vote for within the assembly. Presumably the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel doesn't wish to scrutinise the matter. How do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading? Deputy St. Peter. There are simply 2 articles, so. Well, I mean, you can propose them en bloc. Yes. Are they seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the articles in second reading? No one wishes to speak on the articles in second reading? Then I close the debate. And given the last vote, unless someone indicates a vote contra within the chat or otherwise, then I will take it as a standing vote. We won't physically have to stand, but could anyone now, if they wish to be other than a standing vote, could they please now indicate in the chat? Very well. The articles are adopted on a standing vote. Do you move them in third reading, Deputy? Is the law seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? No member wishes to speak in third reading? Then I close the debate. We will again deal with this on a standing vote. If anyone wishes a recorded vote to be taken, please indicate in the chat. Senator Pallett has sought a standing vote, therefore ask the greffier to place a link in the chat. The link is there. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Very much. Pour. The law has been adopted in third reading, 40 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link. A further 3 votes pour within the chat and 1 in the assembly itself. Very well. We now come to the draft income tax amendment stage 1 of independent taxation, Jersey Law P78, lodged by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. The main respondent will be the chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, Senator Moore, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft income tax amendment, stage 1 of independent taxation Jersey Law 2000, a law to amend the income tax Jersey Law 1961 to provide for the first stage of independent taxation for people who are married or in a civil partnership. The states, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm here today with mixed feelings as I present the draft law that would begin the phased introduction of independent taxation into Jersey. On the one hand, I am disappointed that we are holding this debate in 2021. It simply should not have taken us so long to reach this point. Jersey is lagging behind the rest of the developed world. I am disappointed that parts of our income tax system are so archaic that unpicking it to create something more suited to the 21st century has been cited previously as one reason for delay rather than a call to action. And I'm disappointed for the wives, married same-sex couples and civil partners of Jersey who have not been treated equally or fairly and who, on occasion, have been shocked, dismayed and embarrassed that they needed their husband's or partner's permission to speak to Revenue Jersey about their own tax affairs. On the other hand, I'm proud to be presenting this draft law to the Assembly for our consideration today. I'm proud to be part of this Assembly as we begin to make these significant changes to our personal tax system. These changes, taken together with our decision last year to abolish the prior year basis of paying taxes, are undoubtedly the biggest changes to our personal income tax system since 1928, when income tax was introduced. Sir, since I became Treasury Minister, I have fought hard for a fairer personal tax system. With this draft law, I believe the vision is now clearly in view. I am proud that Jersey's tax system, if members agree with me today, will be in a better place when compared to the system I inherited in 2018. And I'm delighted that, with my assistant ministers and Treasury officials, I've found a way to bring forward this draft law in a way that protects the financial position of islanders who might otherwise lose out from the transition. So I'm sure members will recall the debate on personal tax reforms held in 2020, during which I spoke about some of the most outdated parts of the current law, including the provisions that hold a wife's income is deemed to be her husband's income, and how from that one outdated provision arises so many of the problems in our tax system. It is precisely that deeply ingrained tangle of which our predecessors were wary. They were right to be wary. I cannot understate the real difficulties posed by the moves to independent taxation when the starting point is a system in which wives and partners are all but invisible. Following that debate in February 2020, the Assembly agreed to take some transitional steps on the journey towards independent taxation. Much has happened since that debate, to put it mildly. The extent that some of those transitional steps were no longer required, such as the introduction of so-called joint and several liability for couples in legal relationships. Those steps are no longer required because I'm asking the Assembly to take a more profound leap, a leap to a system that provides those fundamental rights for everyone, whilst at the same time protecting those on lower incomes who might otherwise have been financially affected by the move. In the last few years, I've been asked many times why we cannot move straight to independent taxation. Surely it cannot be that hard. But if states members recall, if we had moved overnight in a so-called quote unquote big bang approach, we estimated at that time that over 8,000 couples, mostly lower income families, would have financially lost out. In developing a solution to that problem, we have identified the need for a compensatory allowance, which will be highly responsive to the individual circumstances of those existing married people. The allowance needs to be programmed into Revenue Jersey's system, and we are forecasting that Revenue Jersey should be able to activate it as early as 2024. So I'm consequently proposing a phased approach to transition to the new system. Phase 1 will commence in 2022, Phase 2 in 2023, and Phase 3 possibly as early as 2024. Phase 3, which is the provisional starting point for mandatory moves for existing married people and civil partners to independent taxation, depends on our readiness to provide the compensatory allowance. The compensatory allowance would be available to anyone who needs it, who is already married, for a transitional period of 10 years to ensure they don't pay more tax as a result of these proposals. That compensatory allowance will be set out in the next phase of draft legislation in 2022. The legislation will provide for review of the ongoing need for the allowance after that initial 10-year period. Today, I'm asking the Assembly to focus on the first two phases of the implementation of independent taxation. The draft law before us today will achieve two main goals. Firstly, it will mean that couples who marry after the 31st of December 2021 or move to Jersey after that date will be treated independently for income tax purposes. That means that while we make this transition over the coming years, no more people will be treated using the existing outdated rules. Additionally, from 2022 onwards, the draft law also offers independent taxation to the 600 or so couples who have previously elected to be assessed separately in the old system. Those couples who are most likely to be ideologically aligned with independent taxation, if they choose to adopt independent taxation in 2022, would act as a pilot group to help Revenue Jersey test and further develop the detailed processes and procedures needed to manage the next two phases of transition. Secondly, the draft law also creates phase 2 of the transition, which will allow all couples to opt into the system of independent taxation from 2023. This could see up to 14,500 couples move to independent taxation in 2023, because they would either be financially better off or at least no worse off. The third and final phase of transition would see the mandatory move for everyone else into independent taxation, but with those financial protections I have already mentioned. We currently estimate that about 7,100 couples fall into this third phase. As I have said, the draft legislation for that phase will be presented to the Assembly during 2022. So I would like to emphasise the considerable amount of consultation that Treasury officials have undertaken to reach this point. A full public consultation was held in early 2019, and the results of that consultation directed us down the path of independent taxation. We followed that up with focus group sessions, which enabled more in-depth discussions with some of the trickier questions. During this process, I have also engaged at length with the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I'm pleased that the panel supports this legislation in principle. I thank the panel for their very comprehensive and detailed comments presented to the states on the 9th of September. Despite the complex nature of the subject, the draft law I present today is relatively simple. Couples who are not yet married will continue to be treated as if they were single, even if they do marry. Married couples and civil partners who arrive in Jersey from January 2022 onwards will be independently taxed. And in most cases, that will mean that they will continue to be independently taxed. Independently taxed couples will receive individually the same personal exemptions and allowances as unmarried couples. For the time being, until the later stages of legislation are brought forward, all other spouses and civil partners will continue to be treated as a couple under the existing rules. The draft law does not make any changes to the tax allowances available in respect of children. Independently taxed couples will decide between themselves how they would like to split the allowances. This approach is consistent with the approach currently taken for unmarried couples in Jersey. A small change is made to the childcare relief article to ensure that individuals are not able to benefit from more relief than the amount they paid in childcare costs. Sir, this is a momentous day for Jersey and an important step in delivering greater equality between the sexes. It removes age discrimination from our provisions of same-sex marriages and for civil partnerships. I am very grateful for the support and encouragement we have received from all quarters of this Assembly to enable us to get to this point. Sir, I commend this draft law to the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Minister. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
They are, sir.
Open the debate. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. And the Minister is quite right that the move to independent taxation is long awaited and could bring an essential change to an outdated and discriminatory system of taxation. However, the proposals before us should sit within the four watchwords that guide Jersey taxation rules. They should be both low, broad, simple and fair. This proposal does not quite fit that bill. Firstly, before the Assembly today, to enable the move to independent taxation, the Assembly has, of course, agreed in principle to the wider move, but has not agreed to the three-phased approach that is before us and causes the issue that prevents this proposal from being fair. The panel notes that the phased approach appears to conflict with the statement provided in the government plan, where independent taxation was defined as being introduced for the year of assessment 2022. The panel is concerned that the use of a phased approach to independent taxation could result in two identical families paying different levels of tax, depending on which phase of the move to independent taxation is adopted by that taxpayer. The panel also would like to highlight the following areas to inform this debate in the Assembly. Firstly, disparities due to income. The panel's advisors report, which I hope members have had an opportunity to read, provides several calculated scenarios to demonstrate how the phased move to independent taxation, as outlined in the draft law and from evidence gathered by the panel, will affect those on various incomes and in variable scenarios. For example, the number of children and the different levels of contributions to the overall household income. The scenarios demonstrate disparities between the amount of tax paid by couples on different incomes and identifies that lower income couples could see a significant increase in taxation, whilst those on significantly higher incomes will see benefits. The panel advisor has calculated that single income couples without any additional allowances other than the basic married man's allowance will be almost always worse off under the proposals due to the shift in allowances. The Minister has indicated in the report to accompany this proposition and in its public hearing that the panel that additional legislative changes will be implemented at a later date to allow for a new compensatory allowance to mitigate any potential financial impact to those taxpayers who would be worse off. The panel received submissions from islanders who expressed serious concerns and worry about the impact that the compensatory allowance will have when it's removed after that period of 10 years. The panel are concerned that the framework for the compensatory allowance has not been covered in the draft law, as it's a fundamental component for the introduction of independent taxation to prevent significant financial inequalities, and its inaction within the draft law sets a dangerous precedent. The panel advisor has also identified that wealthier taxpayers will enjoy benefits under the proposed tax change. The Minister highlights in the report to accompany the proposition that this would yield a potential cost of around £4 million to the Exchequer. This in addition to the increased administrative cost of between £1.25 and £1.5 million. The report to the proposition indicates that the Minister is currently considering options to offset the cost to the Exchequer, but there's no detail provided to the Assembly, and it's not able to determine the effect for the taxpayer. Other allowances. The default position for child allowances, according to the proposition report, is that couples will equally share this allowance. The panel notes concerns expressed by its advisor that some couples may see an increased tax bill if one partner does not have sufficient income to shelter their tax allowance, and the panel concludes that clear advice is to its use must be made available to taxpayers. The panel advisor has also highlighted that to reduce administrative costs and to simplify the tax system, the child allowance should be removed from the tax system and operate an alternative, such as the adoption of a child benefit system, as found in the UK, where a tax-free benefit payment is provided to the person to whom the child or children reside with. The panel concludes that the Minister should provide full clarity to the States Assembly and the public regarding the future of child tax allowances in Jersey and how it will adapt under independent taxation. The panel also wishes to note concerns about the application of mortgage interest tax relief and other allowances, and would strongly urge the Minister to provide clear and easily accessible information to alleviate the concerns of islanders. Now we move on to communication and the consultation period. The panel received 71 submissions for this review, which identifies the level of interest amongst the public. From those submissions provided from members of the public, the panel is of the conclusion that not enough information has been provided to islanders about the planned move to independent taxation and how it will affect taxpayers. The panel is particularly concerned that many islanders who are pensioners on lower incomes and those with care responsibilities have expressed worry to the panel that they will be negatively impacted through those changes. Indeed, our advisor used the word lamentable. It's a lamentable situation that we are in. The panel agrees with its advisor's report that insufficient information has been made available between the lodging of the proposition and the planned debate, and that the Minister has not sought to publicise the details sufficiently or adequately behind how independent taxation and the compensatory allowance will work, and work to ensure that islanders will not be financially worse off because of independent taxation. The panel received a demo version of the online calculator in September and is concerned regarding the accessibility of the calculator, with particular concern given to those with colour blindness or difficulties in distinguishing colour, and that the calculator lacks some of the necessary details of the taxpayers will need to receive, to understand their financial situation. In conclusion, the panel would like to express its disappointment in the lack of communication provided by the Minister to islanders on how independent taxation will affect them, and the failure to adequately ease the concerns of islanders, particularly those on lower incomes. This is the second summer during which the Minister has conducted inadequate consultation over a compressed time period. Last summer, we warned the Minister and her team that this was unacceptable, and we find it very disappointing that they should follow a similar route this summer. The panel would strongly urge the Minister to immediately begin work on publicly addressing the concerns outlined in the panel's comments paper and ensure that no islander is left to worry about their financial future from a tax payment perspective. The panel notes that independent taxation will inevitably result in an increase in the administrative costs to be incurred by Revenue Jersey, and would recommend that the Minister regularly reviews the department's resource to ensure that it's able to sustain the additional work that will be required. The panel would further recommend that the Minister provides a clear understanding to the Assembly of the planned future of the child tax allowance following the introduction of independent taxation. Finally, the panel is concerned regarding the benefits that wealthier taxpayers are likely to enjoy under the regime proposed by the draft law, and would strongly urge the Minister to undertake work to ensure that islanders on lower incomes do not subsidise those on significantly higher incomes, whilst providing further clarity on how she'll mitigate any tax benefits obtained from those on higher incomes during phase 2 of the draft law against those not in the scheme, but on identical incomes. Therefore, our advice to the Minister is to take back this law, to listen to our advice and conduct the necessary work. These are historic changes, yes, but they should also be understood and workable. After all, as I said in the opening words, the watchwords of Jersey tax are low, broad, simple and fair. Sadly, sir, this phase does not meet those maxims, and particularly does not meet the fairness.
Thank you very much. Senators, any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles? I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I must emphasise that there's been a huge amount of consultation on this, with 5,000 responses, more than, but approximately 5,000 responses to consultations, to focus groups over the period of time. And I think by saying the scrutiny chair referring to consultation this summer, a lodging period is not a consultation. We established all the consultation beforehand, and the focus groups, we've acted on everything that came out of those focus groups, which is why it's taken so long to present this draft law. Senator Moore also mentioned the concern over the removal of the allowance after 10 years. The removal is not confirmed. It's an initial stage and it's bespoke to each taxpayer to make sure that nobody, absolutely nobody, suffers as a result of this move to independent taxation in a financial sense. And in year 5 or 6, there will be continuing reviews, but a full review in about 5 or 6 as to whether we continue it after 10 years to make sure that nobody disbenefits from this. The disparity of the tax, as mentioned by Senator Moore, is again compensated by the compensatory allowance, which I talked about in my opening remarks, which will be provided for 10 years if required and extended after that, as I just said. The communications, we've already expressed to the scrutiny panel that they will be quite considerable. There's going to be a leaflet drop to all households explaining how to do this. There, of course, will be a website. There will be briefings, constant briefings to the public, and also briefings at parish halls during the rest of September and October. So there's plenty, and the Citizens Advice Bureau, of course, are helping with all that as well. So there's plenty of accessible information. The child allowances will not be affected at this stage at all, and also the compensation, the tax threshold in this island is much higher than anywhere else, and so if it means that, for instance, a couple's joint income is £70,000, so one earner on £60,000 and another one on 10, I'm just picking up an example, then the under independent taxation, the earner on £60,000 will be paying a percentage in tax, the earner on the £10,000 will be paying nothing because the threshold is £16,000. So it does eventually evaluate itself. I'm not quite sure what else. It does not meet the fairness question, which is what the scrutiny chair alluded to. I don't think in the scheme of things we could have been more fair with making sure that nobody suffers from the move to this. It is a complicated move, there's no doubt about it. We all understand that, which is why it's not been attempted before. But it is time to move from a 1928 law, as I keep saying, and the archaic attitude that women are chattels of their husband has always been difficult to accept. So we have to move forward on this, and I just hope the Assembly will support this complicated but achievable move, and reinstate the amount of work that has gone into this to get it this far. Thank you, sir, and I ask for the principles to be voted upon with the appel.
That is called for. Therefore, I ask the greffier to put a voting link. Oh, point of clarification, Senator Moore, is a point of clarification of your speech or of the minister's?
Of the minister's, sir.
Yes, please.
I just thought it would help the Assembly if the minister could elaborate on the fairness point, particularly with regard to those on higher incomes.
Do you wish to speak further, Minister, on it?
Well, I thought I'd alluded to that, sir. The whole phasing of this, which again the scrutiny chair alluded to, has been done to ensure that there's fairness across the board, and it will take time to adjust. It's not going to be fairness immediately, which is why the compensatory allowance is being brought in 2024. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very well. I ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Right, Iverson Clement. Abstain. The principles have been adopted, 36 votes pour, 4 votes contre, no abstentions within the link, and a further 3 votes pour in the chat, and 1 abstention in the Assembly. Very well. Presumably, Senator, your scrutiny panel doesn't wish to scrutinise the matter. You've already done it, in effect.
Well, we have to an extent, sir, yes.
So you don't wish to call it in?
Tempting as it is, because we would like to see the points that we've raised addressed, but sadly it's not the will of the Assembly, so I shall not.
Very well. Yeah. How do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading, Minister?
Thank you, sir. I'd like to propose the articles en bloc, please, if that's acceptable to the Assembly.
I'm sure, but do you wish to talk to them at this stage, or do you wish to ask questions? Answer questions.
I can, if the Assembly wishes, go through each article, but there are 15 and several of them overlap each other, so I think probably best to accept questions.
Very well.
Thank you.
Are the articles en bloc seconded for second reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in second reading? Connétable of St Lawrence.
Thank you. So I have a query on the articles.
Yes.
Well,
this is your chance to speak
Yes.
about any of the articles,
Yes,
or
thank
indeed
you.
ask questions
I
about.
thought so, sir. Thank you. So my question to the Minister is with reference to Articles 10, 11, 14 and 15, sir. And those articles refer to the opportunity for election by spouses and civil partners to opt for independent taxation. Article 10 and 14 refer to those options for the year of taxation from 2022. And if the spouse or civil partner wishes to opt for independent taxation from 2022, then they must apply no later than the 29th of October of 2021. However, should they choose to opt for independent taxation from 2023, Articles 11 and 15, then they must apply no later than the 29th of July 2022. And I'm wondering why they have a shorter time period to elect to opt for independent taxation from 2023. So I think it's about 3 months less to choose to opt for that independent taxation. And whilst I'm speaking, so I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Scrutiny for their report, which I found very interesting. And I think it was summarised succinctly by the chairman when she spoke earlier, sir.
Very much, Connie.
Thank you.
Did any other member wish to speak on the articles in second reading?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Connie of St Brelard.
Yes, so just picking up on Article 11, 12(1)(d)(3), an election cannot be revoked. I find that a bit permanent, and I wonder whether the Minister would answer why it is termed in such a way. Thank you, sir.
Is any other member? Yes, Connie St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I'm worried about the same, because it seems to me that both parties have to sign to elect this option. So one could argue that one partner could still control the other. And also with what Constable St Brelard said, if one partner puts pressure on the other one to agree, and then they disagreed, it says an election cannot be revoked. That really worries me.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. My question is around the future proofing for when the committed move to opposite sex civil partnerships is seen through. A commitment from the previous Home Affairs Minister. Is this legislation future-proof to allow for that? But I also share those concerns raised by the previous two speakers. But notwithstanding, I did want to thank the Minister as well, because she has given additional briefings to myself and Deputy Pershad and other interested members, and I really do applaud her for her commitment to this, because I think it has been a complex and huge piece of work, which others I think have perhaps considered and deemed too difficult to address, but she's seeing it through, and I have great respect to her for that. And I know that particularly the married women of Jersey are very grateful to her as well.
Something more?
Thank you, sir. I'd be grateful if the Minister could express how she proposes to meet the fairness test when some couples may choose to elect to move to independent taxation in a year that is earlier than another. As I pointed out in my earlier speech, sir, some couples will benefit from doing that, and therefore that does not meet the fairness test, and it's not clear in the articles how it will be met.
Does any other member wish to speak in second reading? No other member wishes to speak in second reading. And I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. First, to the differences in timing, as pointed out by the Connétable of St Lawrence, which is 10 Articles 10, 11, 14. Yes, one was 29th of July and one was the 29th of October. And it's the difference between civil partners as opposed to spouses being independently elected. And I think that electing for independent taxation. And I think the same question was from the Connétable of St Brelard and the Connétable of St Martin also remarked on that. And the revoked cannot be revoked. Largely, that is because it does sound strong language, I understand that, but because by 2023 it will be mandatory for everybody to be on independent taxation. So that's why it was put quite strongly. So you have until the end of 2022 to elect to be independently taxed, but it will be mandatory in 2023. So there's discussion time between partners to come to that agreement. I thank Deputy Doublé for her kind remarks, and she and Deputy Pershard and the Connétable of St Martin were very interested and had several briefings with us and lots of questions on this, and I thank them for their interest and support. Senator Moore again says it is unfair. The move to independent taxation in 2022 is, as I said, I think in my opening remarks, for those 600 couples who have already elected for separate taxation as opposed to the term independent taxation, because we cannot, Revenue Jersey could not simply deal with 20,000 couples moving in 1 year. It's not possible. And the 600 couples are already being separately taxed, so it will be easy for them to provide information back so that we can pick up on any, and that Senator Moore also pointed out lots of questions from scrutiny which will be addressed in this pilot year. That's why we're attempting to achieve this with couples who are already being taxed separately. So it made sense to have a pilot scheme to see where Revenue Jersey, what they have to tackle essentially, and where we can improve, as Senator Moore said, any smaller parts of legislation, and so can come back with that after the pilot. Thank you, sir.
Well, ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat. The vote is on the articles in second reading. The link is there, and ask greffier to open the voting. Connétable St Clement, how do you vote? Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The articles have been adopted in second reading, 37 votes pour, 3 votes contre, no abstention in the link, a further 3 votes pour in the chat and 1 vote pour notified in the assembly. Very well. How do you wish to deal with the matter in third reading, Minister?
Microphone. Take this opportunity to thank States members for their contributions today, and also the officers of Revenue Jersey for the enormous amount of work involved in this transformation of such an archaic tax law. So I propose the third reading, please, and call for the appel.
Is the law seconded for third reading?
It is, yes.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I speak now. It's a difficult one because actually it's a little bit jammed tomorrow because it's the detail that comes through the next tranches that are so important. And I would say now that we will certainly be keeping our eye on those, because when we talk about fairness and we talk about people not being affected in negatively, that is a very generic term. And it's a difficult situation because we do need to move forward to independent taxation. This should have happened many years before I was in this assembly, and we all know that. But we've got to get this right because it is irreversible, and to some extent quite rightly. I mean, a part of me wants to ask the question. I hope my wife isn't listening. I do have a plan to be a kept man, and whether I can pass on my tax allowance, but perhaps that's not appropriate for today. But I think there's the detail on what can happen with tax allowances is very important, particularly on middle and low incomes, because those subtle differences and those losses to income make massive impacts on people's lives. People are planning. One of the biggest problems with the tax system at the moment is the random changes that tend to happen to people's tax, particularly around October time, sir, when people suddenly have their tax allowances changed and they haven't been able to plan for them. Now that's okay if you've got excess income, but many of us and many people have not got that, and you have to look at where it's coming from. And I just say that as a warning in third reading of this, that supporting this today does not mean that we won't be absolutely what's the word, detailed perhaps in chasing that is what happens into the future, because there's still the risk of this not working if we don't get it right. Plus, sir, I would say that it may, what concerned me a little was that the size of the job in hand cannot be used as an excuse for not getting it right. I think, yes, that's exactly what I need to say. We've got to get this right. It's got to be usable, and I think the fact that it's irreversible is exactly the reason why we have to do that. So just those comments in third reading and to look to the future. Thanks.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. And Deputy Ward is absolutely right. There is a lot more work to do. Of course, there will be 2 more tranches, as we've heard. I would like to just point out at this moment that it is a shame that the Minister did not take the advice and reconsider returning to the Assembly with a better package that has clarity and fairness in it also at this stage. There is little point, sir, in conducting extensive scrutiny and indeed investing in the time of an advisor as well as the time of the panel to consider these items if the Assembly is not going to listen. I absolutely take responsibility for perhaps not working the room and warning members of the messages that we had within our extensive comments paper today. And so that I have learned, and I shall not make the same mistake again, sir. But it is actually the people who will who have expressed their severe concerns about the impact this may have on the amount of money that they will have to pay the Treasury at the end of the year or not. The simply whether or not they actually have to pay that is not the case. It's the level of concern that has been expressed to us, and the level of concern that has unnecessarily being provoked by Revenue Jersey and its consultation period that is lamentable and unfortunate. And well, sir, as I said, lessons learned today, but I do urge the Assembly and members to listen carefully to scrutiny in the past. Some may say that we're here and behaving in a political fashion, but this has been an objective process. We have conducted this with the help and assistance of an excellent advisor, and everybody will have seen that in the level of detail in the comments paper. And so yes, this may be an historic move, and of course it's something that we all wish to see, but our job here in the Assembly is to ensure that it's done well, and sadly that has not been done to the best of our abilities today, and I regret that. Thank you.
Very much, Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And as it's third reading, I'll keep this brief and relevant. I listened very carefully to what Senator Moore has contributed in this debate, and I think she's made a series of extremely valid and important points that cannot go unnoticed. But I just wanted to clarify at this point that in this journey towards independent taxation, the Minister has had my support and the support of Reform Jersey at this point, but she must know that that support will disappear instantly if at the next stage of this process, we do not get the safeguards that we require in terms of ensuring that those on low and middle incomes are not unfairly penalised by this, that the allowances are put in place in such a way to secure that for those people. And the phrase mitigate, sorry, the word mitigate has been used. I would prefer the word eliminate when it comes to those potential downfalls there may well be for those. And I would absolutely oppose any sort of change that led to a situation where this change ended up providing tax breaks to the super wealthy in Jersey, because they have too many breaks as it currently is. So I use this opportunity in third reading to make that point to the Minister, that she's had our support on this step of the journey, because the journey is the right one, but she should be prepared for a significant fight if at the next point of this the detail is not forthcoming in the way that it needs to be done. And I would suggest taking heed of the points that Senator Moore made, because they were extremely valid on that. So I will support it in third reading and eagerly await the next part of this journey.
Contact opportunity.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to mention to the Minister, obviously I will be supporting this again, but I do have a concern which is expressed to me by my parishioners on a regular basis, that do with the Revenue Jersey, they got adequate resources to deliver upon this? Because the comment that I often get, and I apologise if it's not parliamentary, is it's more easier to get an audience with the Pope than Revenue Jersey. So, but I'll leave it there, so thank you.
Contact Harbison Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the Constable of Trinity. He always manages to raise a smile, doesn't he, sir? So I've been in this assembly long enough, sir, to hear the platitudes of former Treasury ministers when they've told us that they could not deliver this. And this minister, sir, has, as Senator Mezek just said, begun the journey to the independent taxation that the public and members of this assembly and previous assemblies have been asking for many, many years. And I thank her for that, sir, and I applaud her for that, sir. And it has not been an easy journey by any means, but she's got on with it, sir, and she hasn't given us the excuses that former ministers have rolled out over the years. That said, sir, I do have some reservations. I have supported this afternoon. I am grateful, as I said earlier, to Scrutiny for their comments on this. I can assure the chairman that I did read the comments, sir. I do have some concerns about this. The details on the compensatory allowance, although that is part of the journey, that they will be crucial. And I look forward to seeing those. It is clear from the scrutiny report that the public, and certainly older members of the public, do have concerns about how this will impact upon them. And we've heard that they feel that they have not been consulted, notwithstanding that we've heard today that there will be a leaflet drop to households. And of course, the constables were aware that the parish halls have been requested for public meetings later this year. I'm also concerned about the administrative costs of, I think, £1.25 to £1.5 million to manage this, which are additional to the lost revenue potentially of 4 million. And from what I can understand, the minister has yet to explain how those administrative costs will be met. So I am, as we've just heard from Senator Mezek, talking about the journey, and I think the minister alluded to that. I am grateful that we have started this after many years of being assured that we would reach it eventually. So it's the first step towards the independent taxation that this minister and other ministers have been asked for by different members over many successive years. And notwithstanding the fact that the chairman of the scrutiny panel feels that perhaps in this instance or in this case, her report and her panel's report may not have been perhaps scrutinised as closely by members as it should have been and deserved to have been. I will be supporting this, but I hope the Minister takes on board my personal worries about the lack of some detail. But I'm looking forward to seeing that in the next tranches. Thank you, sir.
The Connétable, Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. It's just an observation, really, and I think it's strange when we say that the overall broad principle of our income tax system should be that it's broad, simple, and low. And of course, we know that it's not low for the majority because there were lots of add-ons, if you like, long-term care, etc. It's only really low for the super wealthy and for corporations where it's either zero or next to zero or basically negotiate with the tax man. But for the rest of us, it isn't low and it doesn't look like it will be ever in the future. And it's certainly not simple is the point, because if it were simple, then these changes would be straightforward. And it seems to me that the reason that the complexities arise in the first place is because of the allowances. And so whilst one might be tempted to say, well, then get rid of the allowances and then we don't have a problem. Of course, in doing so, that would make the system more regressive. But I think we do need to look at the nature of the allowances. And of course, what you could say is that, well, because income support is based on households rather than individuals, how does it make sense to move to an individual taxation system if you've got a contrary system in your benefits where you look at people's family circumstances? So even somebody who, and I've said this often before, even somebody who hasn't got a job and doesn't have their own income stream, and this is and can be seen as a feminist issue. If we have any feminists in the Assembly, I'm not sure. Their ears should be pricking up now, because it's often it's likely to be women more than men who are affected by not having their own income, but nonetheless having an economic necessity within any relationship or family setting, because they're very productive, but they don't necessarily earn a salary. And so when they might fall on hard times, as a family collective, they can't claim their own benefit if their partner is actually earning sufficient money. So that can keep people in oppressive and abusive relationships. And of course, it can be applied to any gender, and they don't have the right to claim their own independent benefit. So one question I would ask is, what's the point of independent taxation if you don't have an independently assessed and access to the benefit system? So that's one question I'd like the Minister to consider, if not answer, at this point. But also to emphasise the fact that the allowances which cause this whole issue are themselves can be themselves very unfair, because they give a block amount to an individual or to a family unit, but it doesn't take into account the fact that those personal circumstances may be vastly different. So an individual who currently benefits from £16,000 a year allowance at the moment, whether they're single or in a non-married relationship, that £16,000 is applied to you irrespective of what your financial setup is. So you could have inherited a house which has been in the family for generations, and you don't have any outgoings apart from perhaps maintenance rates, etc. Whereas somebody in a very in a similar financial situation in terms of their income could be renting a property and using all of that £16,000 allowance to pay their rent for a property that isn't theirs and will never be theirs, and the rest of their living allowances they have to pay out of their own salary with no income with no tax relief on that, which the non-disposable income nonetheless being taxed at 26%. So it's a very difficult area in which to talk about wanting to be fair, because all circumstances are different. And the notion of being able to pass on your tax allowance to your partner, or why not even your children, because, you know, if you have children living at home for income support, their income can and will be taken into account if they're part of the same household. So why wouldn't it be taken into account for taxation purposes, and why wouldn't you be able to pass your tax allowances on to any member of your household? And I think probably the only way to get around this, but I think it would make it probably even more complicated, would be to actually submit your living expenses as an individual, as a business would do. So if you earn whatever amount a year, you're actually only taxed on your disposable income, and you are taxed at whatever rate is agreed, whether it's the 20%, 26%, and that there's a list of things that you can claim as legitimate expenses, as any business would be. And those legitimate expenses would probably be utility bills, and they would probably be rental if you're in a rental property. And of course, there's a conversation to be had around whether mortgages should be included in that as well, given that ultimately you're buying an asset. So I put that into the pot. Even if the minister can't necessarily respond to all of those points, it might provide some food for thought for the BODs who are working in the background, who have put a lot of thought into this from the tax office, or Revenue Jersey, as we call it now. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Could I remind members, Standing Order 75.3 on the third reading of a draft law regulations provide the debate shall be confined to the content of the draft as adopted in second reading. The debates up to now, or the contributions up to now, have certainly dealt with those things, but also have gone rather more broadly into taxation in general, and that's not in accordance with the principles for a third reading. Senator Valois.
Yes, thank you, sir, and I'll keep my comments brief. I want to join others in congratulating and thanking the Minister and the Department for what is a mammoth task, and it's not to be underestimated. But what I would like to ask the Minister is to explain, with the work that's going to be carried out regarding the pilot group that's mentioned in the report for this first phase, how will the dissemination and accumulation of such data and information be shared with other states members to inform the debate for phase 2, for us to understand the complexities? And I would ask that with regards to the communication and the leaflet drop, as to whether actually there may be circumstances that aren't identified within that pilot group, that it may cause particular issues, especially for mixed family groups who have separated over the years, and have a very complex situation in terms of their tax structure and their family structure. So again, sir, I just want to reiterate my thanks and congratulations to the Minister and the Department. But like we say, this is a mammoth task and this is the first phase. So I want some assurance from the Minister about how that work's going to be carried out for the next phase, and whether there will be any consideration at the Council of Ministers for the Law Commission report on redress when we refer to areas such as appealing for tax and understanding a much simpler system that was recommended back in 2017. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Conor Bullard.
Thank you, sir. I don't think I'm straying too much from the draft in requesting the Minister before bringing the next tranche to the Assembly to give answers to the some 8 recommendations as put forward in the scrutiny report. Thank you, sir.
Very well. Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wishes to speak in third reading. I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I shall be as brief as I can in responding to questions asked in third reading. The Deputy Ward and Senator Moore referred to the detail, several others have as well, in the scrutiny report, which, as I said in my opening remarks, was extremely comprehensive, but was only presented last Thursday, the 9th of September. So I think probably some members have not had the time to go through it all because it is a very comprehensive report. And I can assure members that all attention to the details in that report will be addressed. I do, as members hopefully will know, do not give up easily, and I do my homework, and I can assure everybody, including Senator Mezek, who had concerns about that as well, that I will follow it up for as long as I am permitted to in this position. The Connétable of Trinity said, can Revenue Jersey cope? That's an often asked question. And because of the prior year basis to current year basis change that this Assembly agreed, and with this coming up, we've increased the resources for Revenue Jersey in the form of staff. And yes, they had a difficult time over the change of an antiquated computer system, 35-year-old computer system, which they had to change, and the move to from Cyril Markmore House to Social Security premises. That took quite a lot of change and resource, but we've made sure that they have enough resources now to cope with both of these. But that's another reason for a phased approach, is so that there is time to adjust to what people come back with the pilot group and with what people say, and taking note of the scrutiny report as well, which, as I say, is quite new to all of us. We will certainly keep a firm hand on the detail of it all. The Connétable of St Lawrence questioning the 4 million and the 1.25. The first phase of this can be accommodated in the resources that we've got already. So that is for the second and third phase, the 1.25 to 1.5. And it is a forecast. It may not come to that, but it had to be pointed out as a point of detail. The 4 million, again, is a question. It's the cost to revenue, and it relates to the taxes claimed from couples currently taxed at the standard rate. Only 10% of the population pay 20% tax at the moment, but in the move to independent taxation, would pay less tax, as the lower earner would now be eligible to the single person's threshold. So for some, it works extremely well. Others, there will be a penalty, which is why we're introducing the compensatory allowance. But we will certainly be monitoring the detail. Deputy Tallier again mentions it not being unfair on lower earners, but as I did say, that there's a £16,000 threshold here. So if one partner were to lose their job, they wouldn't be paying tax at all. So I think it's a very generous threshold. Senator Valois, thank you for your thanks. And phase 2 is included in this legislation that hopefully we're just about to pass. And so it'll be the constant monitoring of this, as I promised we will do, over the next year or so before we bring forward any propositions for a debate on phase 3, which will then be the mandatory move to independent taxation. And the Connétable umbrellas, I think I've already answered, in as much as we will, absolutely will, follow and monitor all the details that have been expressed. Thank you very much, sir. May I move in the third reading, please, and ask for the appel?
Indeed, the bill is called for. I ask Griffith to put a voting link into the chat.
Excuse me, sir, my device has expired on me. Could I record my vote as poor?
You can, when I've opened the voting, of course you can. Yes. I ask the Greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Connétable Trinity, you wish to vote a poor vote?
Yes, please, sir.
And Connétable St Clement? Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Law has been adopted in third reading, 36 votes pour, 2 votes contre, no abstentions noted in the link, a further 3 votes pour in the chat, and a further 2 votes pour notified in the assembly. Very well. There is an act opératoire, legislative act, which brings this into immediate effect to be dealt with next, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Act declaring that the Income Tax Amendment Stage 1 of Independent Taxation Jersey Law 2000 has immediate effect. The states make this act under Article 12 of the Public Finances Jersey Law 2019.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I would ask for the Assembly to respond to the act opératoire and agree to it, please, sir. Thank you.
Is the proposal seconded?
It is, sir. Yep.
Does any member wish to speak on the legislative act? No member wishes to speak, then I close the debate. And would any member indicate whether they wish a recorded vote to be taken or whether this may be done on a standing vote? Figuratively speaking. There is no indication to the contrary. Accordingly, I will record that as a unanimous vote pour on a standing vote, and that therefore is adopted.
Thank you, sir.
The next item of business before the Assembly is the draft Social Security Amendment of Law Minimum Earnings Threshold Jersey Regulations P79, lodged by the Minister for Social Security, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Social Security Amendment of Law Minimum Earnings Threshold Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 50 of the Social Security Jersey Law 1974.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. These regulations amend the Social Security law to help support Revenue Jersey to modernise and improve the revenue collection process for employers. At present, the Social Security law requires employers to collect and pay Social Security contributions for employees once they work 8 hours a week or more. These regulations will mean that employers will collect and pay Social Security contributions for employees that earn at or above the new earnings threshold instead. These minimum earning threshold will be set at the equivalent of an 8 hours a week at the minimum wage. This will be £66 per week or £289 per month based on the minimum wage today, or £73 per week or £320 per month based on the minimum wage proposed in P85. However, sir, I will set the rate in an order following that debate in line with what the minimum wage is set and what the minimum wage will be in 2022. This change will apply from the 1st of January 2022. At the same time, the new combined employer return is introduced. The Health and Social Security panel has presented a comment to my proposition, and I am very grateful for this. I would like to reassure members that this change will not have a significant impact on employees with low wages. My proposal change is as close as possible to being a straight swap for the current rule, which applies to employers and employees that work less than 8 hours a week. The estimated numbers of employees that scrutiny quote includes anyone that works less than 8 hours a week, but most of these will not be affected by my proposals because they can earn less than the new threshold. A much smaller number will overlap and start to pay contributions. This will mainly be people who work 6 or 7 hours a week above the minimum wage. However, many of these people will benefit from their contributions along with their employers' contribution, which will go towards their record to benefit for benefit and old age pension purposes. There will be a very, very small number of people whose contributions do not improve their record because they already have a main job which gives them their full record. Sir, it is a very, very simple thing I'm asking today, and it does help the Revenue Jersey and the employer to do one return. Sir, that's really all I have to say. I recommend the principles, and I would be glad to answer any questions that members have, if I can, sir.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? No member wishes to speak. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I think that there are some questions that we need answering on this to understand the exact impact of who will be affected and how they will be affected. I listened to what the Minister just said and noted a couple of words that were used when outlining what impact it would have. I recall she said wouldn't have a significant impact, and that is of course different to there will be no impact. So I think we need to know what that impact will be. It may not be significant in the grand scheme of things, but is it significant to those who are affected by it? What sort of numbers are we looking at in terms of those numbers of people? What are we looking at in terms of the financial impacts to the department and to those employers and employees as well? What sort of types of people will be impacted by this, and how does this affect potentially young people who are just doing a few hours as a weekend job, or people who have a second employment contract with a different employer just to do a few extra hours to top up as well? Can the Minister attempt to give some clarity on that? And I really am asking for some specifics here in terms of the numbers of people to be affected, given that she said there wouldn't be a significant impact as opposed to there being no impact at all.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Hegarah.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the panel received a briefing in relation to this, and basically I'm just going to reiterate what our conclusion says, in that although it says the draft regulations as a small change would have a significant impact on certain employees, individuals working at the lower end, as the previous speakers managed to say, we also queried whether there will be other consequences for employers and the Social Security Fund. The panel believes that if adopted, the regulations will result in more people being captured by the Class 1 contributions, which will impact both employers and employees. The panel understands that the information about the changes proposed by the draft regulations have been communicated directly to employers and the public, both by email on gov.je webpage. Much of the information available online is directed towards employers, and the panel is concerned that there has been sufficient, whether there has been sufficient or not information in relation to individuals who may be affected by the changes to their contributions. The panel has not lodged an amendment to the draft regulations, but wishes to highlight its concerns to members in the hope that the Minister for Social Security will address those issues in this debate. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Tampton.
Thank you, sir. And as Vice Chair, just wanted to echo the words of our Chair on the comments that we have provided to members, which I've equally shared in the chat channel for members to just review to see where we're coming from with our concerns. We did request some data on how many people may be affected, and the department, as we mentioned in the comments paper, said it's estimated that there are about 600 people whose main job is less than 8 hours per week, and you'll see the rest of and that's where our concern started to go. It wasn't a definitive list, and as our Chair has mentioned, there were other concerns that we had, and I think Senator Mezek was also alluding to, that that this will be a significant change to certain members of our society, while not in great numbers, but will have a change. So we understand from the very thorough and very upfront briefing, as we always have with the Minister and her department, but it just does leave us with some concerns and questions. And just to reiterate the point, that the communication, which is something I'm always massive about, while as the Chair mentioned, I just want to echo that I don't know, and we don't know, if that consultation with individuals is as affected, and how do we monitor that, if employees are going to take full responsibility to explaining, or will that be something the government will do? It just raises more questions for us, and again, we just want to hear that, but we do have concerns, and I know there are others, but I just wanted to raise that and hope members have had a chance to read our paper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'll be very quick. Listening to previous speakers, questions that come into my mind: why minimum wage and not living wage? We try to attract people to work in hospitality where we're missing, and hospitality now happy to offer 11, 12 pounds an hour. And we probably have people who are happy to work 6, 8 hours to support the hospitality. And now they're thinking, oh, it's kind of, it feels there is more question at the same time, what is the maximum? So if somebody or having 50 pounds an hour, maybe it does. I'm not sure. I didn't prepare the speech because it came to mind. What I'm trying to say, if this step will not limit options for people who are looking for the part-time job or to work less than 8 hours, to actually opt out and not to go, and it will not leave small businesses who would have support during the Saturdays or maybe Mondays or maybe a couple times a week after whatever people doing, to actually not to go to work, and we will get less people who would like to be employed and will have less wages offered, because as an employer you will not pay contribution if you are paying minimum wage, but if you pay 11, 12 hours you need to pay a contribution which will increase your outgoing for 6.5%. So all these questions are in my mind. I'm not and I would ask Minister if she can address my concerns.
Thank you, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to follow the previous speaker because it added something to my list, because I'd written the question down. Is the effect of this change regressive? And actually, I think what was just articulated is the fact that that's absolutely a point. And I've got a number of points that I will raise, and I was very concerned about this. Looks like a small change and the actual effects it may have long term. I just go back to that point, and I think as we try and push for a living wage, and we have issues with hospitality, we have issues after Brexit, we have issues after COVID with the workforce, anything that may impact on getting people to work a small number of hours but to fill in spaces and have that flexibility has to be looked at extremely carefully before we move forward. My children would have had part-time jobs when they were young, and when they first get that bit of money for themselves. And one of the questions I have, which hasn't been answered, is how it would impact on young people who may work 8 hours now on a Saturday or Sunday and not pay Social Security. But if their employer it pays them well, they will very quickly go over the threshold. And seeing as employers are paying £10 an hour for people as they go through, I know 1 or 2 coffee shops who definitely pay above that, and they attract young people and they keep them regularly and they train them. And it's that we keep talking about on this island, to train and keep staff longer term, even if it's part-time and then they go away to university and come back and work regularly. And I can't help thinking that this is regressive, but we just simply don't know, because there is no information. We don't know how many people were affected. We don't know the financial impact directly on people that were affected. We don't know the impact on the labour market. We don't know the impact on low-paid workers, and this will affect low-paid workers disproportionately, or those who are taking a second job to top up the high rents that are paid, or just that little bit of extra for the family, and are paying full Social Security contributions. And to a young person of 16, 17, 18, first going onto the labour market, the notion of a state pension is many years off for them. So I think, sir, that's a really important point to be made. And that small amount of social security that they and the employer may be asked to pay can be significant. And I wonder whether the effect may well be, I don't know if I can't believe I've read this correctly, but it could actually mean that what would happen is that you would get people working for longer hours for less, so that they don't come into the social security contributions. Now that could be absolutely retrospective in what we're trying to do in terms of the wage that somebody earns. So I've got to the point with this piece of legislation, or this piece, that I actually feel, sir, I would like to ask for a reference back. I don't think this is a complete piece of work. I don't think we know the impact. I don't think we know the long-term impact on particular sectors of our labour market. I don't think we've taken anticipation on the effect of Brexit and COVID and the hospitality industry and other industries that might need this flexible workforce. And I don't think this should have been brought to the Assembly in the state so that we don't know what's going on, particularly the comments from the scrutiny panel, who have been very neutral in their comments, but because they've got nothing to work on. Scrutiny on something with such little to work in is very difficult to do. So, sir, if I was to ask for a reference back, it would be to ask for how many people.
I think if you have to take your colours to the mast, are you going to ask for a reference back?
Yes, I am, sir.
Then what is it precisely you wish to have clarified or further information provided, so that members can know whether or not they support a reference back on that basis?
So I wonder if I can give you the list, and that you may assist in making it more coherent, so to speak. Basically, it's how many are actually directly affected by this, which age demographics are affected most, the effect on the labour market in terms of the problems we've faced post-COVID and post-Brexit in particular, the effects in particular on the hospitality industry, who and I'm including cafes and restaurants in that, but it should probably also include retail, and the possible implication of how many would be brought into the social security system who weren't already there, of a younger age. I think those questions are not answered, and they need to be for us to make a coherent decision, and it will be up to the Assembly to decide as to whether those are pertinent questions or not, sir. But I personally at this moment cannot vote for this because there is no information there for me to vote on, and I would be opposing something that, with the right information, I may not oppose, because it may actually put people in the right, in a better position, as is suggested. Further, sir,
I'm sorry to get in, but just to be clear, how many are affected by this? What are the demographics as to age? What's the effect on the, did I read this right, the labour market?
Yes, sir.
And what is the effect on the hospitality industry, including retail?
Yeah.
And then I missed, I'm afraid, the last clause or two because I was concentrating on standing orders.
I sort of forgot my own last point, sir. It's in my notes.
But the implication was the first word I jotted down.
It was the implications of how many people will be drawn into paying social security that weren't before. And so I think, yeah, I think these are the questions I don't think have been answered or addressed here. And so I would ask the Assembly for a reference back until they are answered, so that we may be able to make a more informed decision. This may be a great idea. It may say, make things easier for employers. So I may add to that list, I question whether it does make things easier for employers, simply because they have to record their workers' hours anyway. How on earth are you going to work out their pay unless you work out their hours? So it seems to me that we're actually adding a layer of administration when we're not intending not to. But that's a separate issue, so that might be something that's covered at a later date if the reference back is successful.
Very well. So you propose a reference back. Is the proposition for a reference back seconded?
Yes,
there's no discretion afforded to the chair. It's entirely open to the deputy, as he has done, to seek a reference back. It's been duly seconded. So a debate now follows on whether or not there should be a reference back. It is restricted purely as to whether or not there should be a reference back and to no other subject. Therefore, I open the debate on whether or not the Assembly wishes to have this referred back. Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. And these questions were arose at scrutiny, and in the comments that we provided, it's estimated, I'll try and go through the list the deputy wants on the reference back. It's estimated there are about 600 people, that's 1% of the total employed, that their main job is less than 8 hours a week. If someone works a Saturday job at 8 hours a week, they're already in the system, sir. Makes no change at all. It's under 8 hours, so 7 hours. Labour market, sir. The labour market is, I can't answer that one. If people want to send it back to see what effect it'll have on the labour market, the deputy made it very clear that he wants to know hospitality. There are many, many workers doing the few hours a week are in the cleaning industry and some gardening and other industries. So those 600 out of 55,000 workers will be spread across many more industries than hospitality. And how many will it draw in, sir, to Social Security? Well, you don't draw into Social Security, you pay into Social Security. I know the deputy said, sir, when you're 15, 16, doing, well, 16 nowadays with employment law, it's very hard to get a job under that. It may seem a long way off before you get a pension, but you may be entitled to other benefits, sick benefits. Some people don't only work their Saturday job, they work in the weeks when they can, in the holidays, to supplement their student loan or student to help them. And they will pay Social Security into their, it goes towards their contributions in later life. It goes to if they have sick money. So this is a very, very simple change. I will stick to the reference back. If we get back to the main debate, I can make the order at the living wage. I was going to discuss that with scrutiny. The order will have to be laid, and if people didn't like it and they don't believe I can do that, I can do that, because I couldn't see where the amendment will come from, except it would be a different rate. And I've already said in my opening speech, sir, that I would not lay an order until we have decided what the minimum wage or the living wage is going forward, and will come in before the 1st of January next year. So, sir, I mean, if this is referenced back, if I can find out what effect, the only thing that isn't answered there is what effect it would have on the labour market, I think would be very, very hard to do. I will say, sir, if it's referenced back and it's not ready by January, it may employers make it very hard to employ people. And I'll leave it there. So I really, really think that it should not be referenced back. The numbers are there. All the numbers were in the scrutiny report supplied by my officers. And I wish the deputy had read them. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Sullivan.
Point clarifications?
Point of clarification from the minister. Yes, very well. If the minister is prepared to give way for a point of clarification.
Would you please, would the minister, sir, please expand why, if the order will not be made before January, it will be very difficult to employ under 8 hours from January?
I said I would make an order after we've decided what the minimum wage rate will be. I could make that order. I'm saying, if I didn't say that would, if there's a new employer return as of the 1st of January, but it gives them one return, social security tax, etc. And employers may choose if they have to then divide it and say, well, this person's by hours and this person's by money. I just make that example, but I can make the order. I will make the order before, because an order just late. I don't know what the order will be yet. I can change that.
Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And there are some fundamental questions that need answering which haven't been answered in these by the Minister in her presentation. And the fundamental question that needs to be asked is, does this produce more revenue for the taxman and the Social Security man? And if so, how much? Because it's one thing to say this is a minor change and will have very little impact upon these people who work low hours, often at low wages. So that needs answering, and it's also directed, it seems to me, at the convenience of the taxman and the employer, but not at the convenience, if you like, or without consultation with the low-paid worker. Has there been any consultation with low-paid workers or their representatives? Has anybody talked to Unite about what this impact might be? So I think those questions need answering, and I think in support of the reference back, we ought to give the Minister time to find out some of these things, and certainly to consult with Unite or other representatives of low-paid workers. That's something that needs doing before we start on this. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputies, any other member wish to speak on the question of the reference back?
So do I get to respond?
Yes, you get to respond. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I obviously completely agree with what Deputy Sutherland just said just now, and I think that to understand the impact that this would have on real people's lives, I think we need to have some numbers in front of us to understand that, because what I'm not prepared to do is to vote for something that I think is going to make some people who already have a difficult time in life worse off at the end of it. My basic principle is that I don't vote for anything that's regressive, and at this point it's not clear whether that impact will be regressive or not. So if the Minister can come back with some figures identifying what that impact is, then we can be more comfortable about supporting something like this. But I would urge members to consider that the decisions we make in this chamber have a real impact on real people in their lives, and we shouldn't be prepared to rush things through without an accurate understanding of the impact it will have on them, and a reference back provides perfect opportunity to get that clarity. So I'd urge members to support this.
Does the other member wish to speak on the matter of a reference back? Another member wishes to... Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. I just thought we better speak on behalf of the panel. I hope our fellow members don't mind, but just to refer to our comments paper where the panel acknowledged the simplifying of requirements as outlined in the proposition. However, one of our queries was that there will also be a number of employees, particularly in certain industries, who typically employ some staff for a small number of hours, for example, teaching, tutoring, who would be affected by the changes. They will now have to pay towards the Class 1 contributions for some staff. However, we didn't receive the information to provide to show all types of businesses or industries that the draft regulations could affect in this way. And we were keen to ensure that the suitable consideration was given to this during the debate, which is why we left it to the will of the Assembly and why to hear from the Minister today. So I feel that just want to draw that point, because I know our comments are being talked about a lot, and I think that was there are, as the Minister rightly said, information that was provided to us about numbers, but again, I draw to the point that it was estimated. We didn't see a concrete spreadsheet with definitive numbers, which is where our concerns were. So I just wanted to bring that clarity and where our comments papers have been talked about. Hope that's helped members.
Thank you, Deputy. Colin Tarbison-Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I was just looking again at the panel's comments and had noted that they'd said they had not lodged an amendment to the draft regulations, but they wished to highlight their concerns to members. And it appeared to me, sir, that it would be useful if the Vice Chairman has just spoken, so maybe the Chairman could address this now. It would be useful if the Chairman or another panel member could actually tell members what they were considering to lodge potentially as an amendment, because they make it quite clear the panel has not lodged an amendment. I read into that potentially they were considering lodging an amendment. I may be wrong. We can be told about that. But it seems to me that if they were considering lodging an amendment, it would be helpful to us to know what that amendment would be. And I think maybe for Deputy Ward as well, the proposer of the request to have this referred back. It would certainly help me in my decision as to how I vote on the proposal to refer back. I think the comments themselves were pretty open-ended. They didn't really support, I think, what the Minister was trying to achieve today. They didn't clearly support that. I've seen more supportive comments from the scrutiny panel, and in fact probably the Minister herself has written more supportive, or as chairman of panels in the past has submitted more supportive comments. So I'd be interested to hear from members of the panel, if not the chairman. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the matter of the reference back? Deputy Guida.
I'm going to add something which probably has will have an influence on whether members want to reference back or not. But we've had similar problems in France, and frankly, the way this was addressed is that the problem really was fairness. So if I understand well the way the system works now, you start counting by hours. So somebody who works at the minimum wage for 8 hours goes into the social security system, must pay 12.5% with their employer, over £64 a week. Somebody who would make £50 an hour because they teach something, or they're a student teaching guitar in their off hours, would earn for 7 hours £350, but not have to contribute to social security. So is it fair that something that is not quantified at all allows some to make quite a good living out of something and not pay social security, and also to be at the absolute minimum of minimum wage and minimum work time and not contribute? Sorry, and have to contribute. So I think the first thing is fairness. The second thing, and that's what happened in France, was basically safety, because it's also quite possible to negotiate with your employer to say, well, instead of giving me 10 hours, just give me 7 and say I'm paying more, or sorry, say that you're paying me more. I'll still work the 10 because you need the 10, but we'll just pretend I'm not there. And of course, that has quite an influence on work accidents and other circumstances where that person is still working but not actually, supposed to be there. So we've talked about the unseen problems of changing this to value, but we haven't talked about the benefits actually of changing it to value, the fact that it is fairer and much safer. Thank you, sir.
Did any other member wish to speak on the matter of a reference back? No other member wishes to speak. Italian.
Thank you, sir. I don't disagree that there's merit in considering this change in due course, but my concern is that there are still several unknowns, and we don't know how it's going to affect different industries. I don't know what level of consultation has been done in reality. I think on the one hand, of course, I'm thinking of hospitality, and I'm thinking that only this week we know that we've heard again how there were real issues that are facing that industry. But I'm also thinking about, for example, and I don't think I need to declare an interest in it because I don't really do that much of this work, but I've got friends who are quite close to the, let's call it an industry, but I think it's much more informal than that, is the music industry. And I think conversations need to be had about how that is going to affect them, because what happens is that a lot of the hourly rate that is charged, for example, for musicians or for even people who provide services that are ancillary to that, the hourly rate may seem like quite a lot, but once you take into account the fact that, first of all, a lot of them won't be registered as businesses and so won't be claiming expenses and won't be deducting that from their hourly rate, there are real costs that are nonetheless associated with it. There may be public liability insurance. There's the cost of actually buying and servicing the instruments or the amplification equipment. And when you take that into account, whilst a lot of them do and are happy to put that down on their tax receipts, they're not necessarily making profit always. And what I know from the music industry, if we're going to call it that, but often it's informal musicians who are playing a little bit at the weekend, doing the occasional wedding, the occasional pub gig now that they're allowed again, that they're using that often to supplement other work that they're doing, but often they're doing a lot of voluntary work on the side, which again I'm saying cross subsidizes. So by the time if they were to actually be charged contributions on this, and maybe the minister will say that it doesn't really apply to these people, it's for not for self-employed, but I'm not clear about that. So I'd like to have more information about how it's going to affect different industries in particular, not only in the one I've just mentioned, but more generally. I don't feel the right level of consultation has been done, and I don't see why it needs to be brought in now. If it's a good idea, it will probably remain on the table, but we need to know. I think as Senator Ferguson often says, we need to know about the unintended consequences of anything that we're putting forward, and here it seems that there may well be some. So reference back, I think, is entirely sensible.
Deputies, any other member wish to speak on the merits of a reference back? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Ward to respond.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for those who spoke, and particularly those who focused on the reference back itself, because I think it was a broad discussion, to be quite frank. I will start with Deputy Guido, and he raises some points, but I think the important thing is, yes, you're absolutely right, we don't know. We really don't have the data on that. We don't have the information on the effect of that in Jersey. This is exactly why the reference back occurs to me. And can I make a few points? I do realise it's close to 5:30, and I apologise for that. But it doesn't mean we just leave it and let things go through that aren't detailed enough and have enough information to us to make an intelligent decision. Because I think it is Deputy Tadu mentioned, and Senator Ferguson often says, the unintended consequences. I think there's some really important points made about the demographic. Which demographic is this affecting most? If it's disproportionately younger people on this island, and we do not know, then this is a regressive step back for us in employment law and encouraging young people into the workforce. And so therefore it needs to be looked at. And we need more information and detail on that. This is not just, and please, sir, I hope people will understand this. This is not me sat here just trying to wreck something. I want to be able to vote appropriately, sir. And I do not believe that the comments, it was made, and I have read the comments, I have, you know, actually covered this in enough detail. And I was looking for the detail. And as the debate has gone on, more and more people raised the issues, sir, and more questions arose in my head. And when I reread the comments paper from the scrutiny panel, and the Constable of St Lawrence made a very good point about it not being the most supportive paper I've ever read, and I totally agree. And it's in those spaces that I believe that sometimes we make bad legislation. So we're not saying throw this in the bin now, but what I'm trying to say is we need a reference back to look at the things I've mentioned, the demographic, the industries I've written here, but I've talked about particular sectors of our economy. And to be quite frank, sir, I think if we do have the reference back on that, any sensible department would look at that and think, okay, actually, yeah, there was a good point made in the debate about musicians. There was a good point made about cleaners and so on. We'll include that, sir, because we don't want to come back again and have another reference back when someone says, oh, well, he didn't include these things. So I certainly would be covering those things as well. And that makes good law. and the actual number of those we are certain it will affect. It seems to me as a real guesstimate that we have of 600, but we don't know how much it will affect. What we could be creating here is an economy, sir, of oh yeah, well I'll say we pay you this, but yeah, here we have this Sunday then under the table because you won't have to pay social security. Is that really what we want to do to our young people? This is your introduction into the workforce. You can fiddle your way out of paying tax. So that's not what we want to do. And if that's an unintended consequence of this, then we pass in the wrong laws. So I would urge the Assembly, let's vote for a reference back. Let's come back to this when we have a lot more detail. Let's have the debate in a much more informed way. Scrutiny panel might want to look at it again and make some more comments. I don't know. I don't want to lump work onto them. But sir, at the moment, I can't vote for it. That might be the wrong decision from what I've got. I think there are other people in this Assembly who are so unsure as to what to do with this. So let's pause, let's go back to it. Dare I say the benefit of a 3-week sitting, if we've got a bit of time, a bit of irony from me there. But sir, I believe that this is the right thing to do, and I urge members please to vote for the reference back, and let's look at this in more detail later on. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Well, I ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. Vote is on a reference back to secure the information originally set out by Deputy Ward, but it seems to me that there are additional items of information that other members have sought as well. So it's a reference back. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Constable St Clement. Constable Trinity.
Conch.
How many have we got? 41. No, we're not getting any more. Members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. $20 votes pour, 18 votes contre, and 1 abstention in the link. A further 1 vote pour in the chat, making it 21, and 3 votes contre in the chat and in the Assembly, making it 21.
Do I choose you to arm wrestle, sir?
1 abstention, and I'm afraid it's lost. It's lost. Yeah. And I'm afraid that means that the proposition is lost. Deputy Ward, had you finished your speech?
Is this on the main proposition?
This is back on the
no, sir, I hadn't.
Well, we have reached that time where standing orders require that I invite the Assembly either to adjourn until tomorrow morning or to continue.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept the adjournment of the speech.
Is the adjournment proposed?
Popular.
Is it seconded? And does anyone wish to speak on the matter of adjournment? No, everyone seems to be moving for the adjournment. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.